Hello everyone, welcome back into another stream of Last Protagonist reacting to videos. It's been a while since I've done one of these. I hope you guys are doing well as always. Looks like we have Gameranx, Mortis, Metal Wolf, and Tanner here, nice and early. How you all doing? Gameranx, you didn't want to spoil the playthrough of Silksong, but this should be safe. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest, because I don't know how in-depth these videos are going to go. I was trying to be a little bit generic, but I haven't watched these beforehand, so I couldn't tell you. And there's no guarantee that I don't necessarily want to talk about some later game features. So for those of you guys who are still going through Silksong, I want to give a spoiler warning, although there isn't a guarantee that there will be spoilers for what it's worth. And Gameranx, nice to see you again as well. So, right, on last night's stream, we went ahead and completed Silksong, got 100%. I finished off the collection of the Hunter's Journal. I had a lot of fun crashing against the final boss for a bit. Maybe it was like, a dozen attempts, something around there. So that was a pretty good fight. And yeah, I just really enjoyed the game. I think it's a very solid 9 out of 10. But that's mostly because I don't really give out 10 out of 10s, because to me a 10 would signify that there's nothing about the game that I think should be changed or improved, which is virtually impossible. Maybe one day I will find that game, but just kind of as a bit of a rule of thumb. So when a 10 is unattainable, I think a 5 is about an average game. But for those of you guys who are familiar with my channel, you pretty much know that stuff already. So Mendacious Cat, welcome back in, as well as Galaxy Dragon. Mendacious, you're about half and half if you care about the spoilers right now. Gameranx can be vague. The last boss teleport seems random. I think I probably shouldn't have read that out loud. I think that is a little bit too far. So I'm going to remove that now. Tanner, you haven't been able to play much. Ask next, it's a 10 out of 10. You'll die on the hill. Well, there's a couple points in the game where I think like the foreground elements are a little bit obtrusive. I'm not the biggest fan of the UI, at least for going through the menus at times. That is a little bit annoying. So just like those minor things are enough to keep it from being a 10 out of 10 to me. And yeah, overall it's very polished. I did not continue to patch my game, so I got to experience perhaps a little bit of a rougher experience, but one that I wanted regardless. So, okay, folks. Wait, what do you mean for Chrono Trigger? Oh, you're saying Chrono Trigger's a 10 out of 10? All right, so real talk, I really love Chrono Trigger, don't get me wrong, but I don't like the part of the game after, let's be vague about a 30-year-old game for spoilers' sake, after a certain party member leaves, shall we say. I think the game pacing kind of has some issues there that I'm not the fondest of, but I think like up until that point, the game is about as close to a 10 out of 10 that you can get, and the end game of Chrono Trigger kind of falls off for me, but that's just me though. Okay, folks, so with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about what videos I have queued up for tonight. I didn't entirely know what to look for, to be honest, so I was trying to look for videos that had a decent amount of views and may have come out a couple weeks ago that may have influenced the conversation about the game. So the first one I have queued up for tonight is Hollow Knight Silksong Before You Buy, because I figured this is probably, I don't know if it's going to talk about difficulty at all, but at least it'll give me a bit of a baseline of what many people's impressions of this game could be. Then I have Beatmup's Why is Silksong So Hard? And I don't know if this is going to be a bait video, because I don't really think it's like ridiculously difficult. For me, I really enjoyed the level of difficulty as it was. For me, some of the bosses felt a little bit too easy, but I might have been using a bit of a degenerative strat. So it's about 50-50 there, I guess. And then after that, I have Second Wind's Hollow Knight Silksong's Beautiful but Baffling Design Delve. So that I'm very interested in. And depending on how much time left we have after all of these, we should be able to get to Type 2 Productions. Hollow Knight Silksong's Design Philosophy is Puzzling. Now this one had the least amount of views of these and was a little bit more recent. So I don't really think this has influenced as many people, but I'm just kind of curious about what this video is going to talk about, especially because of the stupid thumbnail saying "no fun allowed." So I I and many other people have had a lot of fun with the game. So I'm sure it's just rage bait, clickbait. Anyway. Gallimard thinks Hollow Knight 1 is still harder for him. Yeah, I feel like you get a lot more movement options in Silksong that kind of make the game a lot more approachable or a lot more fun to me, whereas in the first Hollow Knight, it was pretty basic for, it felt at least to me, for a significant chunk of the game. And that could have just been in part due to the way that I explored the areas. I might not have gone where I should have to get the kind of upgrades to make it a little bit faster. But okay, let's go ahead and check out Gameranx's Hollow Knight Silksong before you buy.
Welcome back to another episode of Before You Buy, the show.
Oh yeah, and I know I changed my audio settings. Let's see if you guys can hear that. No, I think I need to output this. All right, did you guys hear the intro of that video? I'll restart it, and I'll need to know about the sound balance because it's been a while. So let's restart.
Welcome back to another episode of Before
How does that sound to you guys, chat?
You Buy, the show where we give you some straight up gameplay and our first impressions of the latest games releasing. It's been 7 long years, but it's finally time to wipe the grease paint off and put that clown nose away, because Silksong is here and we finally played it. The hype for this thing is real. Hundreds of thousands of voracious Hollow Knight fans have managed to crash the Nintendo eShop, the PlayStation Store, and the Steam Store all in one. I almost said the Steam. Why a whole bunch of them Hollow Knight fans.
Is it echoey? Okay, let me look at my settings again. Let's try this.
And crash the Steam. Now,
I can make it louder. Okay.
If you wanted to buy this thing right at release time, was basically impossible. Somehow this little $20 indie game managed to completely cripple every...
How is that for you guys now? I know we have a little bit of a stream delay as well.
The online major storefront. Briefly, I mean, it didn't last, but it took about an hour or so, and finally, I mean, through the error messages and the very slow download speeds, you could actually play it, and it did eventually happen. After all the waiting and anticipation, we finally got our hands on this thing, and that feels surreal. I remember, and forgive me because I think I've mentioned this before, back when the original Hollow Knight came out, that game was so unknown at the time, it didn't even appear on Steam's front page when it launched. It was basically a non-factor to people. It was definitely on the radar of, like, Metroidvania freaks, but it's undeniable that Team Cherry has come a very long way since then. The numbers tell the tale better than I ever could. By November of 2017, Hollow Knight sold a little above 500,000 units. Silksong, on the other hand, managed to get that many concurrent players on Steam in a day. That's the power of a damn good game and word of mouth, I guess.
Yeah, Hollow Knight just kind of had a really slow burn with the word of mouth advertising. Like, I had incrementally continued to hear positive things throughout the years, although I was never really drawn into Hollow Knight's art style, which is why it took me so long to play it in the first place. But when everybody only says glowing things about it, it kind of gives enough of an impetus to check it out. So I did, which I don't regret. But yeah, Silksong, to me, I just love it a lot more than the original Hollow Knight.
How unbelievably out of control the hype for this thing is. I wouldn't blame you for thinking that this is probably like the second coming in video game form. Or expecting it, rather. Like, expectations are crazy through the roof.
Yeah, I think that kind of pressure is really high and will probably never be met, which is kind of why I was always a little bit hesitant to check out Hollow Knight, because the people who truly enjoy Hollow Knight are kind of super crazy about it, and where I enjoy it, I was a little bit more lukewarm on the first one.
Everyone's going to have an opinion on whether this game surpasses or doesn't live up to the original Hollow Knight. I'm expecting a whole lot of hot takes one way or the other. And while I kind of wish I was able to make a definitive statement one way or the other, just wade into the mug with everyone else, we can't really do that. We got the game the same time as anyone else did. There are no early review copies. And as of this writing, it does not feel like I have scratched the surface of what Silksong has to offer.
Let me check what day this came out, because this was 3 weeks ago. The 5th. Okay, yeah, so that's still super early. Mendacious, yeah, the fandom can be intense in a bad way sometimes. I feel like that's true of most fandoms to a degree. Like the Undertale fandom, I feel almost guilty for trying to recommend Undertale to other people now, just because of how out of control that fan base can be at times. Tanner, you say it's hard to dislike the first game when it was so inexpensive. To be fair, because I played the game a couple years after it had come out, like that aspect of it didn't really register to me, because that's about the price I was expecting for playing a game that old. But you bring up a good point that both of these games are super inexpensive, especially compared to their competition. And yeah, just what a crazy year for games, between this one being $20 and Expedition 33 only being $40. And then Chadwick, welcome back into the stream. How you doing, sir?
Nor have you scratched the surface of what Gameranx has to offer if you are not currently subscribed. And statistically speaking, a lot of you are not currently subscribed. So click subscribe.
Hey gamers, make sure you subscribe to the Last Protagonist channel, where you get to watch me leeching off other content like this. I'm sure you guys are pretty much all my subs already, so meme.
Appreciate it a whole lot. It'll get you our new videos as they come out every day, and it'll help make it possible to keep making videos. This is how we keep the lights on, folks. I know it's annoying, but I gotta say it. I appreciate the 30 or so seconds it took. Let's get back to this. Like I was saying, we have not had a massive amount of time with this game. This is more like a first impressions than a full review. It's too early to call it either way. But what I can say, and it might sound a little reductive, but I mean it in the best possible way, it's more Hollow Knight. From my time with the game, it's already a really good action platformer Metroidvania with the same incredible charm that the original game had. At first, it feels...
In a way, I think he's right, but it honestly just felt very different to me than the original Hollow Knight. I think having the parry feature be a little bit more robust felt a lot better to me personally. The pogoing was also very different, at least at first when you had the Hunter's Nail emblem crest. And then as soon as she got the dash, that's kind of when it felt like Hollow Knight 2.0, that it felt like a real step up in terms of the platforming. And the entire playthrough, I was just always saying, oh man, like the movement mechanics just feel so smooth for this. And yeah. Tanner, you're on hour 68 for Silksong, and you'll probably double that before you're done. You think you put 30 hours into Monster Hunter Wilds before dropping it from disinterest. And Expedition 33, you could probably spend 20 hours on. Galamoth, you still don't see how the difference in the parry. Like, I was saying this might be a bit of me just kind of paying attention to it more, but it felt like it was a lot easier to get the parries off, or that they happened a bit more frequently than in the first game for whatever reason. Although, to be fair, it took me a really long time to understand that, like, clanking was really a thing in the first game, so I could definitely buy that being my skill issue and whatnot. Hey, Florge Borge, welcome back in, and thank you for the congrats. And Hitchbot, welcome on in.
Near identical, just swapping out the original's underground city of Hollow Nest with Farloom and replacing the Knight with Hornet. But as I progressed through the game and unlocked new movement abilities and weapons, it very much begins to feel like its own thing. It's still distinctly Hollow Knight, don't get me wrong, but the combat and movement is a lot more sophisticated in the sequel. There's a lot more room for skill expression. The original kind of felt like it was mostly going for the greatest hits of Metroidvania movement powers, and Silksong feels far more distinct and challenging. There's something that...
Yeah, I kind of agree with that assessment right there.
Really surprised me is not just the more engaging movement system, but also the difficulty. Enemies and bosses are generally a lot more varied, They have more complex move sets. They often hit like a truck. I was barely a few hours in before constantly running into enemies that do 2 points of damage a hit. But to counteract the increased difficulty, Hornet gets a lot of new toys to play around with, a lot more stuff to discover, and it makes mass exploration even more rewarding this time around. On top of the standard attacks that can actually be modified with new crests that change up your current moveset, there's also tools which function like sub-weapons for a Castlevania game. These things have limited uses, but they're extremely powerful when used correctly. They can turn boss fights around, hell, make somewhat impossible bosses feel like cakewalks. If you got the right tool, it can be absolutely essential for making progress. I gotta have my tools. I'm sorry, it's obligatory. I have to say it. I have to have my tools. The crests also adjust how your healing works.
It was a little bit funny to me that he got this thing when it was the last tool that I got, when he got this so early, probably within like 2 days of playing or something like that. Sorry to hear about your ice cream there, Hitchbot. That is a tragic story that I've ever heard.
The standard power restores 3 health masks, but the other ones do stuff like buff your attack and force you to hit enemies to restore health. These crests and tools...
Oh yeah, I guess I will say that it does feel a little bit awkward only healing 3 masks and how long it can take to fill up your silk meter, especially earlier on in the game. And there were definitely a couple moments where I found myself cheesing, hitting some enemies by walking into a room and hitting like a weak enemy a couple times and then walking back out to get my silk so that way I could heal. And it felt really bad going to a rest area and not being able to get your silk back from there, and then just kind of having to do the strat if you want to stockpile your silk so you can use your abilities as you progressed. I almost think I would have enjoyed the silk mechanic a little bit more if there were 2 what do you call it? 2 bars for getting like the silk upgrades as well as your health upgrades, because I felt like I wasn't using my abilities as much as I would have liked, but it really wasn't that big of a deal. There is a good bit of an interplay about knowing when you should hold off using your abilities so that way you could heal versus going in on that. So there's a bit of a risk reward there, which is interesting, but at least for me, it still felt a little bit awkward deciding which to use between them.
Drastically alter how you play the game. And in Hollow Knight, basically everybody played the same way because all your abilities were available at any time, while in Silksong, you're a lot more reliant on builds, which adds a very refreshing amount of complexity to building out your character. In general, I'm loving the combat, even when it's busting my balls. The game embraces the skill check enemies this time around, so there will be directions you will not be able to go down because you're missing some key movement ability or something. But just because the mini-boss guarding the path stomps a mud hole in you for looking at them funny, that kind of thing. They haven't locked it per se, but
that was pretty funny. That almost reminds me of the pigeon in Cuphead journalist comparison. Like, he threw the harpoon. He could have just done it again. Although I'm sure I've done many, many stupid things in my playthrough, so I am certainly living in a glass house and throwing stones right now.
You're not getting past that guy either. Platforming has also gotten trickier right out of the gate, with challenging jumping puzzles and specific area gimmicks coming at you pretty hard and fast from the start. If you struggled with the challenging platforming segments near the end of Hollow Knight, you're not going to have fun here. After only a few hours, you'll see stuff right out of the Queen's Garden or the White Palace. It felt...
Why is that so slow? It's YouTube being YouTube. I think this point is probably salient that the people who truly hated the Path of Pain might find Silksong pretty painful, especially early on. I know Hunter's March is kind of notorious as an area for being a really big skill check for many players before they get more movement options. And then, hey, Humble Gamer, nice to see you again. Welcome back into the stream. And that is true, Mendacious. They did change how much damage obstacles did, but I'm sure at the time of this review that patch wasn't out yet, because this was only a couple of days in. Path of Pain versus Cogwork Core. I liked Cogwork Core a lot, but you guys saw the way that I prefer to traverse areas like that. Might be a little bit degenerate.
But I'll say this: if the game felt worse to control, I'd be more negative about it. But it's not. It's a dream of control. Silksong is fantastic. It's asking a lot out of you early on, but I always felt like it was me screwing up a jump, not the game making it impossible for me not to screw up a jump. I've only unlocked a few major movement powers, but they're all pretty game-changing already.
Oh, I'm assuming he doesn't have the wall climb. That would definitely make going through the far fields quite a different experience. I forgot that was even like a different upgrade.
The dash is powerful, but it does require precision to get the most out of it. The float ability does give you a lot of movement utility without feeling overpowered. Chaining even these basic movement powers together feels like you could do some pretty complex stuff already, and it requires a degree of finesse and skill to get the most out of them. I cannot wait to see what speedrunners are able to do with the tool set here. The world of Silksong is absolutely huge, but from my experience, it is a little more linear feeling so far than the first game. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. A slightly more guided experience might be a good idea this time.
That's kind of funny because I certainly did not take the linear path. So definitely a first impression type of video, which they had definitely clarified. So Galamoth, you went from Silksong to the new Shinobi and it feels terrible. Oh no, that's sad to hear because Shinobi 3 is one of my favorite early platformers for the Genesis. And this is Gameranx, Chadwick. I don't know if Falcon is on there, so.
Time around, especially considering the amount of customization you have of movement via builds. You gain a little freedom there, lose a little here. I think that's a decent trade-off and keeps things interesting. Even though one thing that made Hollow Knight so unique was just how non-linear progression could be. Most Metroidvanias look very open, but the vast majority force you down a rigid set path. The promise of freedom in these games is kind of smoke and mirrors, and the original Hollow Knight was the real deal in that respect. From what I have played, though, Silksong is a little more traditional. With you starting at a certain point and everything you're able to do is about advancing in one particular direction. I don't know, this could change later. It could end up being a much more open game, but at least where I'm at right now, it's more rigid than the first. That is definitely...
So if for some reason we have some people who are new to the chat, yeah, you can definitely have multiple ways to access the different areas. And I went down a path that not many did because I kited an enemy to a certain point of an earlier level, and that allowed me to kind of skip certain sections in the beginning.
Not a value judgment because I've certainly enjoyed it, but I am just saying the game is a little different so far. Another thing that's a little different is the quest system. You can sometimes take on quests in this game, and this is one addition I'm a little more skeptical about. I'm not sure that bringing some basic collect 5 bug asses quests really elevates the Hollow Knight experience.
I do kind of agree with that, and I think in some respects, to keep things a little bit spoiler light, the fetch quest for getting certain fluids felt a little bit tedious, although somebody else had mentioned in the chat that you don't necessarily have to do it, and you can get the reward for it later. So that makes me have a little bit mixed feelings on it, because then you don't actually have to do that quest, and you can kind of get an early spike in power if you go through the trouble to get it, and otherwise you don't have to do that later on. I think that makes it a lot more acceptable to me. Hey, Biscuit Keyboard, how's it going? Welcome into the stream. Heard of a biscuit hammer, but not a biscuit keyboard. Florge said, people have gotten the double jump and underworks without activating Act 2. Yeah, I saw earlier today when I was looking up the videos to throw together on this playlist tonight that somebody had already gotten to Seth in Act 1, which is pretty dope. Mendacious, a lot of the quests feel like sneaky ways to trick you into farming rosaries and shards. True, but to be fair, some of the wish boards do state that the rewards are rosaries, but that's kind of one of those things where it's like, well, I probably need to do this to advance like the state of the game regardless. So you're probably on the money there.
So far, they've been pretty simplistic, or in some cases, it's just a more concrete tracking screen for something you would have done in the first game. These things give you a little more of an incentive to backtrack, or at least give you something to do while you're backtracking, which is good. I like that, but I don't know how I feel about them overall yet. They did make it easier to get a map right at the start of the game, so I like that too. You won't be wandering around totally lost for quite as long in this one. But there is one more thing I kind of want to complain about, and it's how everything in Farloom wants to charge you money. This dump is like some kind of dystopian amusement park. You have to pay to like sit on benches, go to stores, open gates, lower bridges, which, I mean, go into stores. You're going to go in and spend money in the store. You have to pay to go in? That's weird. It's relentless, but I guess that's kind of also the point. They are trying to cash starve you. Money is already tougher to get in this game. In the original, like, everything dropped money, but in Silksong, only specific types of enemies drop currency.
That did feel a little bit strange to me, that only certain enemies dropped money. It makes sense from a lore perspective, but it also made fighting certain enemies feel completely pointless unless you're trying to regain health and boost up your silk meter or something like that. And I still don't know entirely how I feel about it, because then in some ways it makes fighting some enemies a little bit less tedious, because you know you could skip them if you want to, and if you do that, then maybe they'll creep up behind you and get you, so there's a bit of a risk and reward to that, but I don't know. So, Robbie, welcome back into the stream. Oh, no, nobody's saying that Silksong's the most difficult game ever made. Just that they wonder if it's too difficult for certain players. Global says, shards became precious later in the game. Maybe, but if you're already that late in the game, you can buy a bunch of shards with rosaries. So it kind of evens out, I think. I never had to use any of the consumables, but I didn't die a ton, and I kind of didn't use my tools as much as I could have. But certainly for architect users, that's probably a more valuable unit of currency for them. That's what made you appreciate the non-rosary enemies? That's true. That's fair.
Everything else drops shell shards, which are only used for replenishing tools when you rest at a bench. Money is both harder to get in Silksong, and you're forced to spend a lot more of it. It's another way in which Silksong is a tougher game.
Yeah, I don't actually know how I feel about only being able to replenish your tools at the bench as well as them requiring the shards. Because if the shards weren't in the game, would that have really affected things? If anything, it might just stop you from needing to farm them if you ever go out. Yeah, I don't know if shards are like the best inclusion after all. Because you already have like a limited amount of tools that you could use at a time. Like they could probably double the amount of upgrades between the lowest tier and the highest tier, and that can make the progression feel a little bit more linear. And you would need less shards, or well, you wouldn't have shards in that system. I don't know. Just worth a thought.
But if there's something I absolutely cannot complain about, it is the art direction. Team Cherry are the masters of crafting a world that feels super interconnected and dense with tons of hidden.
I have two complaints about the art direction. One, I actually think there were too many breakable things that were irrelevant, and they were a little bit distracting at some points, although they definitely make the areas look a lot more fleshed out, don't get me wrong. And then sometimes in certain areas, I do not like how much the foreground covers the midground where the character resides, but that's something that I talk about all the time.
Secrets and lore to discover that isn't always strictly necessary, but it gives the world a lot of life, where so many games of this type can feel generic and barren. Of the small bits of the world I've seen so far, the areas are more varied, there's more going on in them, there's a bunch of little sub-areas that have unique features, and each zone has its own collection of enemies and challenges to deal with. They've really stepped up their game in the art department with Silksong. There's so much charming detail all over the place that's hard not to get invested in while you're exploring this melancholy melancholy world. They strike this perfect balance of cartoonishness and grimness that the first game also managed to do incredibly well, but it's even better here. There's more NPCs who have more personality and character during the brief moments that you interact with them. Even the most basic NPC is memorable for their simple but appealing designs and their incredible animations. Enemies also look great and are universally well animated and fun to fight. For a game that's not exactly flashy in its art style, the game looks great consistently, and it all comes together and makes a really polished and interesting world to explore.
Yeah, I'm really glad that I had the OLED monitor to play Silksong on to make the blacks like really black and the colors vibrant and pop. And my regret for the playthrough was that I didn't realize that I had HDR mode on the OBS program, so you guys are seeing a much more washed out version of the game for like the first however many episodes.
The bosses have some impressive animation, but they're not just there for show. I know I mentioned how tough they are, but they're also just really fun to fight and impressively varied already. The music deserves special mention as well. Silksong goes for the same sort of lonely and mysterious tone as the first game, but it's bigger and more melodic. It stands out more, and that is in a good way. The first game's soundtrack didn't really stand out that much to me beyond some key tracks, but Silksong is already consistently blowing me away with the quality of the soundtrack.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same as he does here. The Hunter's March theme is really good. And then, obviously, he didn't go through the entire game by the time he made this video, but you get a lot nicer tracks as you proceed as well, with Cogwork Core being my standout goat of the game so far. Using the Beast Crest on Morwing. They made some foreground elements less intrusive. Oh, man, that'd be nice. Okay, cool. That'd be a great patch.
The thing about Silksong, and really about Hollow Knight as well, is that it's not all that flashy or bombastic. It's not in your face trying to impress you. It starts slowly, and it reveals itself to the player in good time. It's a game that if you only know about the hype, you might start wondering what the big deal is. But after spending a lot of time with the first game, it becomes clear that it is something special. You need to start getting into those late game areas, discovering the big secrets, and uncovering completely optional zones and bosses, and the many secret endings and the surprises that are in store. The first Hollow Knight was obviously good at first, but it's only by the time you're getting to the end does it reveal its depth. It's a slow burn, thankfully so too. Like, there's not enough of that to legitimately do a slow burn right, and I have to assume that Silksong is similar, and that I've only barely...
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, that it is really hard to kind of adjust the progression curve of the difficulty to make the slow burn work out and get players comfortable with one tool before they get introduced another tool and things like that. And I think Silksong really did do a good job at giving players a little bit of time to breathe and familiarize themselves with their new equipment. There was also a lot of incentive to go back to previous areas, which will continue to get you more and more comfortable with whatever loadout you're using at the time. But I am really curious about how players who play the game opposite to me, the ones who just kind of try to blitz through everything as quickly as possible, not like speedrunners per se, but people that just gotta go fast regardless. I wonder how they felt about the game if they weren't exploring and getting a lot of these wonderful, cool upgrades and tools and stuff. Takashi's challenge. Tana said, Silksong's got kind of the chest behind the waterfall problem. The first game had a lot of secret hidden walls behind breakable walls, or secrets behind breakable walls. And if you include them, it feels obvious, but if you don't, it's not. Yeah, I definitely got bamboozled by a certain breakable wall in a couple different places. But one I legitimately had to look up, and I don't think I would have found on my own. So I only really would have picked up on that, I think, because of my experience playing Hollow Knight 1 and like Castlevania a lot more recently and stuff. So for somebody who's not played those games, I wonder how obvious some of the cracked walls were, because it took me an embarrassingly long time to even notice them in Hollow Knight. And I still don't feel like I was the best at even recognizing them. And I'm kind of curious to go back and see how I'd feel about Hollow Knight now.
He discovered what this game has to offer. I can't really tell you if it's lived up to its impossible hype so far. Maybe it has, maybe it's not. The movement in combat is absolutely fantastic. It'll be hard to go back to the original after playing this one, and the art design is somehow even better than the first Hollow Knight, and the soundtrack is
I think the art design's a lot better because you have a lot more colors. Like the vibrant red of Hornet's cloak is just brilliantly offset against most of the other colors in the game because red is barely used at all. You have a lot of the verdant areas being more green, the leaves, and yeah, just having more color helps brighten the game, literally and figuratively here. And there was something else he brought up. Damn it, I'm going to back it up. People sleep on Crystal Peak? Oh, Crystal Peak is beautiful. It's just got some of the issues of the floor being lava, so you're not really looking at it a lot. But I think the sloped sections are extremely beautiful, and the issue with the slope sections in particular is that you'll be mobile during them, so it makes it a little bit harder to appreciate the backgrounds for what they are.
at first, but it's only by the time you're getting to the end does it reveal its depth. It's a slow burn, thankfully so too. Like, there's not enough of that to legitimately do a slow burn right, and I have to assume that Silksong is similar, and that I've only barely discovered what this game has to offer. I can't really tell you if it's lived up to its impossible hype so far.
Oh yeah, I wanted to talk about the hype. Yeah, I feel like a game like Silksong is probably best experienced blind without the hype, because, and this is true of Hollow Knight as well, it just feels like game. It doesn't feel like most amazing game ever. It just feels like solid game. To me, I do think Silksong does feel better than Hollow Knight, and it just kind of takes the appreciation for the movement mechanics and everything else that's going on, but it's not necessarily something that would blow me away, because it's not particularly flashy. It just feels really smooth. Forge, the hype made it better for you, not gonna lie. Oh, really? Same for you, Galamoth? Could you guys elaborate as to why? Because when something is overhyped for me, like sets the bar really high, and if I don't understand why people are setting the bar that high, it just kind of becomes a bit more underwhelming to me. Galamoth, there were several parts that did blow you away. I'm talking about like on an initial impression. Like, I didn't really enjoy Hollow Knight that much for like the first half of the game, only until I started getting more of the movement upgrades and some more of the charms synergizing together did I start to really appreciate it. Floor, did you say the rush of released anticipation hitting the wall of content after 7 years of waiting? It feels great. Bro, that is a completely different thing than what I'm talking about. I'm talking about if you are somebody who's not even sure that you want to play Silksong. I'm not talking about like anticipating a game that you're looking forward to. I'm just saying, like, if I was somebody who didn't play the original Hollow Knight and I didn't particularly care about Silksong, and then I heard all of this anticipation and hype, I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing for me or for them, because the beginning of the game, it might not be obvious like why Silksong feels like a really good game. Galamoth, maybe because you were already invested in the Hollow Knight world and trusted Team Cherry. Okay, that's fair, but yeah, I think we are talking about different things there. Yeah, but yeah, the actual anticipation, the hype of like looking forward to a release, and then it like meeting those expectations, that is certainly peak. Like, I don't want to take anything away from you guys, but we are on a little bit of a different tangents there.
Maybe it has, maybe it's not. The movement in combat is absolutely fantastic. It'll be hard to go back to the original after playing this one, and the art design is somehow even better than the first Hollow Knight, and the soundtrack is absolutely excellent. On the other hand, it is a lot harder, and that's not exactly a bad thing, but brutally combat isn't why I'm playing Hollow Knight. It's for exploration and the vibes. I'm also not completely sold on Quests either, and some other new additions as well. But from at least early impressions, it seems like a worthy follow-up to Hollow Knight. If you're a fan of the first, or just exploration-based platform or action games in general, it's an easy recommendation. But if you have no time for these types of games, I don't think this is one that's going to change your mind.
Yeah, I think I could see what he's saying there. That's kind of what I meant by saying like Hollow Knight 1 and Silksong just feel like game. As opposed to being like a mind-blowingly fantastic game. Like, it just feels like a super polished platformer akin to Mario, but I don't necessarily know if that's going to be enough to motivate a lot of people to keep playing it who aren't super fond of Metroidvanias or platformers to begin with. And then the other point that he brought up, oh yeah, the questings. Yeah, I'm still 50-50 on them as well. Like, some of the quests are really nice, like getting to work with Chakra to find, or let's say to track her mentor. I appreciated those types of quests. Other ones, like some of the fetch ones and literally like the courier missions, well, it's a little bit annoying, but the courier ones are at least a little bit of a holdover from the first game. I kind of wish that there were more... I say kind of, so let's not have the monkey paw curl on me here. I kind of wish that there were more of the courier missions that were relevant to story stuff, even if it was just like for lore building purposes, that'd be fine with me. But all of those missions are kind of annoying, so I think the amount that they have is fine. I just kind of wish... I don't know, like, I want the rewards to be better, but I also don't want to do more escort good deliveries quests. I don't know. Galamont, that's how you feel about Expedition 33, the duality of man. Tanner, maybe your relationship with Baldur's Gate 3 is closer to what I mean. You hadn't played any of the Baldur's Gates or any Larian games. The game was hyped to hell, but you had no relationship with it. And you don't know if you can say the hype made it better or worse for you. Yeah, probably the same goes for me as well, because I wasn't really interested in Baldur's Gate 3 because the type of combat that it has going on just does not, like, look appealing to me at all. And as I was playing through the game on myself, like, my favorite parts of Baldur's Gate 3 were literally just the interactions between the characters and, like, the role-playing elements, I guess. And I kind of hated everything relating to movement and combat and inventory management. So I feel a little bit on the fence. I definitely see the hype for it. I'm really glad that a lot of people love Baldur's Gate 3 and they've kind of found like their forever game. I think that's fantastic and phenomenal. I do think it's a really good game, but not like the type of game that I'm super into because of the movement and combat and whatnot. That answers my hype question right there. It's just $20 compared to things like Mario. It depends which Mario, I guess. Yeah.
If it's a genre you like or could potentially like, this is a $20 game. It's really hard to mess up a $20 game in terms of value. But this is also probably the $20 game of the year. So...
Oh, yeah. Of the game of the years... So, of the $20 games, this is probably undisputably game of the year. Well, I guess I don't know how much Hades is, but... or Hades 2, I should say. Yeah, I guess I don't even know what other games have come out at the $20 price point this year. But yeah, $20 as a release price is just absolutely crazy to me. I was mentally preparing myself for 40. I was half expecting like 30 or 25. So for it to come out at 20, it was just, I was like, what? Hell yeah, man. That's less than the price of a pizza nowadays.
Will it live up to that? I'm not sure yet. Silksong isn't trying to bring in new audiences. It's not trying to be accessible to everyone. It's Hollow Knight with some new bells and whistles. Some are bigger than others, and I'm just glad I can finally play it.
Hey guys, this is where you fight Lace the first time, huh?
I would call it, as of this moment, evolutionary rather than revolutionary, and that's fine. I said this in an...
That's actually a fantastic point. Evolutionary rather than revolutionary. Yeah, I think for me, like, a lot of the hype that was built up around Hollow Knight, and probably Silksong for people who haven't played Hollow Knight, was that it was like a gaming revolution when it's not. I don't even know if it's like a true evolution as much as it is like a refinement of previous experiences. But anyway.
Another video, and it actually got some kind comments from people saying, thank you for acknowledging that a game doesn't have to be revolutionary to be good. That's where we're at right now, but once we get further, it could change. It could be a revolutionary game. If it's not, I think I'm okay with it, and I think it's an easy recommended $20. I would like for it to live up to its hype, but I legitimately can't tell you yet. What do you think, though? I'm sure some of you have played it at this point, so leave us a comment. Let us know. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed now is a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. So click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications. And as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter, Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on Gameranx.
Oh yeah, that was a really good video. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I'm even going to leave a comment. Commenting a bit late to say that I loved the point about Silksong being evolutionary rather than revolutionary. I'll probably be stealing this as a comparison point when I talk about the hype behind certain games and managing players' expectations. Florage, as much as you like it, you don't think Hades 2 could beat Silksong, given that it's $10 more too? If the games were the same price, would you be more willing to reconsider that point, or do you just prefer Silksong more? Either way, it's fine. I'm just kind of curious about your opinion there. Chadwick said, Falcon's a good presenter. He's a bit more normie, but he is solidly observant and has rational positions. Like, honestly, I feel like his critiques here were really salient, and there were really well-crafted sentences there, which kind of honed in on certain points and were expressed very well. Like that last one there about the game being evolutionary rather than revolutionary is really good. And that's pretty much as I think anybody could hope for with a quick video essay, and even more so for a first impressions video of all things. Clearly, Garfield Kart 2 is going to win Game of the Year. Is Garfield in the new Sonic game? Tanner, you say Silksong definitely feels like what they wanted Hollow Knight to be, refined. Compare the later Pantheon boss design to Silksong versus early Hollow Knight bosses. This is closer to the ideal game that they wanted. Yeah, I think the overall packaging of Silksong is very consistent and consistent with its vision of what I think the game itself wants to be. And that's probably one of its greatest strengths, to be honest. All right. So yeah, that was a great video. Let's go ahead and check out the next one on the list with Beatmup's Why is Silksong So Hard? Let's see if this is a true criticism or if it's just rage bait. Why is YouTube so bad?
I've played a
What did I used to do to fix this? I think I just scrolled down and then scrolled back up. Although I don't think that fixed my frame rate issues.
lot of difficult to finish video games, whether it's Sekiro, Super Meat Boy, 2023's Lord of the Rings Gollum. But Silksong has to take the right.
Oh, Asenex, thank you so much for reminding me. I do have all of the
Welcome back to another
videos queued up for tonight linked on my channel or my video description here, but I also should be linking you guys them in the chat if you want to give them some support. This is the link to Gameranx's Hollow Knight Silksong before you buy a video. If you guys also like the video, I highly encourage you giving them a like and or a sub as well. Brother, pause. You know, thank you for the reminder, Asenex.
I've I've played a lot of difficult to finish video games, whether it's Sekiro, Super Meat Boy, 2023's Lord of the Rings Gollum. But Silksong has to take the rock hard cake for the hardest video game I think I've ever played. Whether it's spending hours throwing my body at the same.
I don't know if he's being hyperbolic for the sake of the YouTube video, or if this might just be the legitimately most difficult game he's played. It'd be easy to like dunk on somebody whose most difficult game is Silksong, but I don't necessarily want to do that because everybody plays games at their own, pace and whatnot. He might not have played a bunch of Nintendo games back in the day, like Ninja Gaiden or Bad Dudes. So I appreciate him saying that this might be the most difficult game that he's played because that'll help set my expectations for his point of view going forward, if he's being honest here. Chadwick, you miss renting games? Oh man, I don't know about that though. Like, I definitely know what you mean. I just feel like the experience was different. I'm assuming you're like talking about going to a place and renting it as well, as opposed to like literally spending your money to rent games. Tanner, you fell off of Hades 2. You even went for a refund, but you waited too long after the purchase. You don't think you could articulate why you didn't like it. Interesting.
Boss over and over and over again, or just the whole ant area in entirety. I swear, this part of the game may as well be a boss fight in itself. Just trying to get around the level. I've left more beads scattered around here than a tourist in New Orleans. Which is funny to me because I don't remember the first Hollow Knight being this difficult. I mean, the hardest part of that game for me was just not getting lost. To this.
So it's interesting that he played the first Hollow Knight and presumably did Path of Pain, maybe not, maybe the Pantheons, assumably not. And he thinks Silksong's that much harder. I definitely understand that Hunter's March, the area with the ants that he was talking about, is definitely going to be difficult, especially for players who aren't good at the Hunter nail pogoing. Hey Stella, nice to see you again. And Meow Laser, welcome back in.
Day, if I boot up the game within 60 minutes, you may as well start sending out pictures of my face to milk carton companies. In that regard, Silksong's world has been a dream come true. While traversing it, I always feel like I have a sense of direction and I know where I'm going, which is typically as far as possible away from the ant area. Oh, but everything else in this game is so extremely unforgiving. Oh, because that silly little idea of rewarding a player with item drops or some sort of currency for doing anything in this game has been stripped away completely. Bosses have 0 loot drops, no XP.
Now, I feel like this point, when did this video come out, is just kind of flat out wrong. Like, certainly some bosses don't really have a ton of loot. 11 days ago, so yeah, I don't know about this. But certain bosses, you get the upgrades from, like, the screen later, so it's just kind of like a little bit of a delayed reward, and maybe that is something that he has more of the issue with, just not like the instant gratification of beating a boss and getting something immediately after. Because I myself did have that feeling a couple of times. I'm like, oh, that was it. I kind of expected there to be more. So I don't want to entirely dismiss this opinion, but he might just be hyperbolizing for the views and whatnot here. Galamoth, you don't think the title's sarcastic? You're awful at games and you just don't agree with him at all? Fair enough.
No rewards for taking him down, leaving you with nothing but a forehead full of sweat and fingertips full of arthritis. The small, minuscule amount of currency that you can scrounge up around this game world, it's the equivalent of reaching behind a dirty old couch to find a couple of nickels, is typically only ever spent on just unlocking basic bare necessities that other games just give you out of common courtesy, like buying a compass.
So I'm wondering if his style of play is kind of like the opposite of mine, where he'll just kind of go very straightforward and not explore a ton. Because if you do that, I imagine the rosary cost will be a lot more prohibitive. Whereas because I explored fully, I felt like I just barely had enough to cover almost everything entirely by the point that I got to it. And then I would be completely broke after buying the thing. So he could be a little bit right here that the rosary acquisition is a little bit on the low end, but they might have already patched this. I don't really know. Yeah, Chadwick, I didn't really have a problem with currency except for like a couple spots, but that's because I explored a ton though, and I backtracked a lot.
To see where you are on the map, or buying pins to see where everything else is on the map, or even just unlocking fast travel locations. Okay, clearly I'm getting a little heated, so maybe I need to walk away and calm down, which actually is...
Although, to be fair, I do think it is a little bit prohibitive to have some of the fast travel positions being, or even the rest areas being locked behind rosaries. That can feel a little bit rough if you don't have enough of them. There was like 1 or 2 times for that happened to me, but that doesn't bother me too much. It's like, oh, more incentive to come back here and like put in my resources. Or maybe now I should take the moment to consider using my consumable rosaries and not saving up for a rainy day. So I don't think that point's too bad.
Is what I do when I play this game and just take a breather for a second. What? But this is a video, so like I can't just take a breather in a video. That would be boring for you guys. I gotta do something. I feel like half of you know where this is going. Let's talk about the sponsor of the video, Raycon. Before you go anywhere though, this one's actually awesome. It's a brand new product. It's a bone shaker. It plays music through your bones.
I don't know why the frame rate on YouTube is so bad on OBS when it's on my second monitor and when I stream.
Kind of. These deliver off-ear audio, so it's not...
I think I had a fix for this. Yeah, give me a second.
Plug directly into your ear, and it delivers the sound with vibrations through your bones. I'm not making this up. You get crystal clear audio without going deaf to the rest of the world. I feel like I have to have one ear out sometimes just in case the baby's crying or in case Kim needs something if I'm cleaning around the house. This is the solution to that. Obviously, they're super comfortable because they sit right over your ears. It sounds like you're wearing full headphones, or it sounds like you've got earbuds in, and then someone will talk next to you and it's like, oh.
All right, so we're 3 minutes in. Let's go ahead and refresh this. This might not work. Nope, that certainly did not work.
I've played a lot of difficult to finish video games, whether it's... I've played a lot of difficult to...
It seems a little bit better. We're at like 314.
It's like, oh, right. Yeah, right. I don't actually. So these are
Nope,
built for
certainly not
all-day
better.
use. They have a 13-hour battery life. They're waterproof and dust-proof. And the best part about Raycons is you get that premium performance and that premium quality at half the price of other leading premium audio brands. And you get a 30-day money-back guarantee if you're not satisfied, if they're not rattling your bones enough. So if you want to try out a pair risk-free, all you gotta do is click the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/beatmupsbc to get 20% off. They also connect to your Switch and Switch 2 since it's all Bluetooth. And speaking of, I should probably connect them to Silksong and keep playing. Is that good? Did I tie it back into the video? I think I...
All right, so Global said, skip the ad. They ain't paying me. That's true. However, these guys got to get their cut as well. And I think it's only respectful to hear out what they say, especially because I'm kind of leeching off of their content. So, yeah, I just, like, in terms of me streaming, I think it's just the more respectful way to approach somebody else's content.
I've taken enough of a breather. Let's go get frustrated again. Because there's no kind of XP or leveling up, you can't really make your character stronger. You can't increase and...
But if for whatever reason I ever get sponsored and somebody wants to react to my videos, I give them carte blanche permission to ignore all ads.
Attack or defense stat as you play. The best you can hopefully do is find some of the tools.
Hey guys, did you know you could help support the channel by becoming a channel member or patron? For each dollar you give me, it's better than the ad revenue of 1,000 views. But no pressure. No, but that's just kind of like the facts of the matter. Like ad revenue isn't that great. So sponsorships are really good for content creators if they want to like make it full time doing it. And unironically, having patrons and channel members does help ease the burden, especially if you want to keep expanding. But yeah, I'm not going to do Raid Shadow Legends or any other gacha-based service, so that's not going to happen.
tools scattered
If it was a sketchy sponsor, would I have skipped? Maybe like an alcoholic one or gambling. Yes, I probably would.
around the game world. And in my first several hours of playing,
Or
here
politics.
are the tools that I found. Throwing daggers. Yeah, that's it. And I also barely use them because I'm pretty sure they're weaker than a regular attack, and to use them, you have to press up and R at the same time, which is just like a Street Fighter level of combination input.
That, like, the combo isn't that bad, but it is a little bit awkward. I'll give him that. I do wish it was a little bit easier to rebind the controls, because certain things you can't, which is just like, why? I don't know.
My brain needs to remember when I'm in an intense boss fight. You think I can deal with all of this and also bust out a Shoryuken? It's usually just better for me to attack normally. So if I can borrow an expression here from Matthew McConaughey that I think applies directly to this game. The bosses always get stronger, but you always stay the same. There was something like that. I don't know. I didn't watch the movie. Interstellar. Right? Never have I played such a ruthless Souls-like game. In fact, that's something else that's funny to me, because in games like Elden Ring, whenever you hear people complain that that game is too hard, the very unsympathetic response that you'll get from the gaming community is, get good.
Wait, did he play Elden Ring? I thought he said he didn't play those. Maybe I missed it in the barrage of titles that he released, especially since he said Silksong's harder. Yeah, I don't know if I'd say that Silksong is harder than Elden Ring. Like, we talked about this on stream when I was playing it, like, in the first week or two. And my impression is, mechanically, I do think Silksong might be a little bit more intricate than playing Elden Ring. But I think Elden Ring's difficulty comes more from its knowledge checks than actual gameplay. And you do need a little bit better fine motor control for the inputs of Silksong, perhaps. Hey, Mao, welcome back in. Mao, you find Silksong harder than Elden Ring? I feel like the more knowledge you have about Elden Ring and its systems, the more you can mitigate the difficulty to a very large degree. Especially when you start adding things in, such as spirit summons and actual summons, or more overpowered Ashes of War and combinations like that.
I've always found to be quite indignant and also mean and also not helpful at all. Because in those kinds of games, you don't really have to get good. It's more so that you need to learn you can't just face the hardest boss right away. It's pretty easy to just leave and go grind a bunch
He's wrong. You can just get good.
of weak enemies and level yourself up. In fact, you can do that so much that you can come back to the big boss and you can one-hit it. And I feel like more than anything, that's the advice that the people are looking for when they ask, why is it so hard? It's more, how do I play this game? But you see, that's what makes
Those are two completely different arguments. Like, get good literally just means don't give up skeleton. Get good, you can overcome it. Whereas, how do I overcome this challenge? It's like, oh, well, did you go explore elsewhere? Like, there are certain sections that you can do in Silksong to get more tools, maybe more mask fragments. They are a little bit more scattered and whatnot, but you could explore a ton in Silksong as well and then come back and overpower a lot of the bosses. Case in point, me in my playthrough, where certain bosses I did crash on and got good, which is really fun for me. And then I would come back to certain bosses later and then just kind of trample over them because my kit was a little bit more overpowered at that section of the game. I had a little bit more health. I could afford to be a bit more reckless. My damage may have been a little bit higher than other players would have come into the content. So this, I feel like this is just kind of like maybe his personal grudge against the commentary of Get Good. But like Stella said, she's kind of tired of people acting like Get Good isn't a meme answer. People actually give you good advice most of the time. To be honest, I will even go so far as to be toxic enough to say that Get Good quite at times is a good answer. Like, sometimes the answer is to just, buckle down and just kind of focus and lock in and then learn what is going on in the fights. Like, fundamentally, like, the boss fights designs aren't that different from what you would get in Elden Ring, or like Mega Man, maybe that's a better comparison, where there's going to be certain boss patterns that you can learn to exploit, and getting good kind of means get good at recognizing patterns and punishing them, or dodging certain enemy inputs, and then maybe using some of the tools that you have access to. But since this guy said he doesn't have tools to, he doesn't like the input commands of the tools, they aren't as readily available to him, which is perfectly fine. You don't need the tools, but they certainly can help you if you have the better ones. But he had also said, like, early on, he had only had the daggers. So yeah, he was on the struggle bus. And I will admit that I think Hollow Knight's hardest portions of the game were probably at the very beginning, and that I think might put some players on the wrong foot into approaching the game. That game's too easy. Hey, Logos, welcome back in. Galamoth, you spent way longer on bosses in Shadow of the Erdtree than Silksong, but you don't know if you can say it's harder or easier. I think, like, part of it, as I said before, is that Hollow Knight might require a little bit more finesse in the inputs. Maybe Elden Ring is a little bit more tight with the timing of certain boss patterns if you're not using things like spirit summons to help you overcome those challenges.
Song's so difficult.
And I think Hollow Knight Silksong is more akin to Sekiro. Maybe not Sekiro. Maybe more akin to, like, Bloodborne in its difficulty.
Because you can't do that. There isn't really, like, big items in the game that you can buy, or things that you can level up to max to get stronger. I mean, there's really nothing you can do to improve your odds against a hard boss or enemy other than getting good. In fact, if someone does say that the game is too hard, in this case, in the case of Silksong, I actually think it's completely acceptable to suggest that they just get better at the game, because there is no other option. More often than not, I will find myself facing what feels like an impossible to beat boss, but he's blocking my path to the rest of the game, and I don't really have anywhere else to go. Like, this is the way that I need to go. So my only real option is just to keep throwing my tits and bits at him and hoping for the best. I mean, I guess I could just aimlessly wander around the rest of the world and hope that I stumble on one of the ridiculously well-hidden secret rooms to get a heart piece, or, you know, load up a walkthrough on my phone and cheat. But no, this is the boss. I know where I gotta go. There's no point me doing anything else. I'm just gonna have to pull all my hair out and beat him. Besides, I have like 150 beads locked in the boss room now that every time I die, I need to run back in and get. And I ain't gonna let those suckers go. But what am I supposed to do? Leave them? You know how long it took me to find all those beads down the back of an ass crack of a couch? Hell no, I got pins to buy, baby. Also, I want to stress that this is just my experience with the game. Maybe there's ways to make things easier. I haven't found them, and I'm not the kind of guy that likes looking up walkthroughs or seeing playthroughs on YouTube to find the best, what's the best weapon in blah 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 game. I always sorry. And I know the thing with,
I wonder if he wasn't hitting like a bunch of walls and wasn't finding more upgrades because of things like that. That could probably really alter somebody's playthrough and the feeling of getting upgrades to make them better equipped to fight certain bosses. And that's one of those things that you don't know until you know, which is kind of a funny sentence, but it's true in a way. And yeah, he did end up saying what I said about getting good. And so it's just kind of a weird way to frame it, which seems like a little bit of a ploy to keep the engagement going and whatnot. Global, you were saying Silksong has way more RNG screen elements that can hurt you than Elden Ring and Souls games do, but Silksong bosses also have way less HP and more openings. That's probably fair, because there really aren't a lot of arenas in the Souls games where there's like hazards that you have to deal with that kind of chip at your HP. It's kind of mostly mono or mono-trio or duo, but anyway.
games like this is there's so many hidden little secrets, and did you know if you went over here you get this thing, but to go there you have to talk to this guy, and then you gotta dingle his berries, and then he'll let you in the cave room, and I don't, You know, that's for a second playthrough. I'm not dingling berries my first go-around. Quote of the year for my channel. I'm not dingling berries on my first go-around. The reason why I'm not interested in all of that, by the way, is ultimately, I'm having too much fun. I don't know if I've actually made that clear. That all of this I've been yelling about, oh, I love it.
Yeah, that's a completely different vibe. Like, you could find a game really difficult, but as long as you're having fun, that kind of gives a bit of a different perspective on the flavor of the playthrough. Mao, you said there's also much less cheese in Silksong? Oh, really? Because I felt like certain strats were pretty cheesy and pretty effective, depending on the boss. Like, the thumbtacks, especially if you made them poisonous, are really good. The Architect is arguably cheesy, even though they give you the tools to use it. So...
Threw you through a loop there for a second. A lot of people having to delete comments. Yes, this game is crazy hard. And yes, every time I take down a big boss, I stand there for 20 seconds staring at his body, waiting for him to come back to life because he hasn't exploded in a sea of coins and loot, signifying that the fight is over like I'm used to. But damn it, if it still didn't feel great to beat this sucker the hard way, because, and are you ready for it? I got good. All you are left with is the self-satisfaction that the game did nothing to help you do what you just did. But dang it, if you didn't just ding diddly do it anyway. In fact, the only thing even close to an actual reward is that after the boss fight, the door to the next area will open as the game just allows you to keep playing it. Oh man. So yeah, that's everything I love about the difficulty of the game. And there's more that I love about the game, but I want to stay on topic with the difficulty aspect, you know. And I want to move into something about the game that's really challenging, but more in a piss in my mouth, I hate it kind of way. And that's the down attack. I immediately hated this. It was such a strange, unorganic change to the gameplay for me. And I know it's a new character, so they had to play and feel differently, but a weird 45-degree angle down attack that also is like a short burst of speed at the same time in a direction was just a really weird choice. Okay, it's actually kind of fantastic in fights. I could do whole boss fights with that thing. But when it comes to the movement in the world, I think I died more times to this messing up while trying to bounce off of things or falling into spike pits than I did any boss fight in the game. I have.
My main complaint with the original Pogo is that it loses momentum and it doesn't go all the way down. It's just a very short burst that just kind of stops. I would have been fine with it if it just kept going, or if it at least maintained the same speed, but it just felt bad at how early it ended. And there were many times when I was initially playing where I would try to pogo and not go far enough because I wasn't entirely used to the controls of that weapon yet. And that is a bit of a get good issue, but I also think that should have not gone in the way that it did. But maybe the devs are afraid that it'd give you too much horizontal movement over a longer period of time, especially if you're crossing gaps. I don't know, but you could already break the game with the movement mechanics regardless. So yeah.
An unlimited amount of 30-second Nintendo Switch 2 clips saved to my SD card of this very thing pissing me off. Oh, specifically in the ant area. I hate that. This is why I hate the ant area. Because you gotta bounce off of these really tiny and super bunched up and close together little flower ball things, and after each bounce you have to then stop and line up this like 45-degree angle to make sure you end up. It's kind of like going into
I apologize for YouTube's frame rates here.
Sherlock Holmes's mind palace, and you gotta plan out the trajectory of every single thing perfectly and execute it to exact detail. Not to mention that muscle memory kicks in when I'm doing this move, and like I know in my head that I'm gonna go at a 45-degree angle, so I want to aim the stick where I'm going. For some reason it like helps my brain to think like if I move the stick at a 45-degree angle, I'll go in that direction towards the thing I want to hit. But it's a down attack, not a 45-degree angle attack, and there is a slight little difference here between just doing a regular right attack and a down attack. So you see where I'm going here. I end up just
I think that criticism is actually a really good one, and probably something the devs should have considered more as well. Global, you got the floaty boy early, so a lot of this wasn't an issue. Fair enough. And then, hey, Ulfer, welcome back into the stream. Nice to see you again.
Doing a regular attack half the time. Thankfully, several hours into the game, I did manage to find another way to attack. It was like a whole different move set that changed my down attack to something much more familiar to the first game. And this saved the experience for me. I'm not gonna lie. I was enjoying a lot of elements of the game, but I was almost giving up. I was almost putting it away in that ant area. That ant area almost made me not, I almost just didn't finish the game. That's the only reason why I even mentioned this down attack, is because...
It's funny because I thought he was going to bring up Blighttown when he first segued into this segment because of him being on that bench earlier.
Like, if you hate it too, just stick with it, because eventually you leave the ant area and get a better attack. Okay, now that all that's out my system, let's talk about what I love. While the initial down attack can go rot, the rest of the combat feels much more fluid and precise than the first game. Hornet is so agile, it makes it so much easier to dance around the battlefield and land your attacks. The world is stunning with this hand-drawn animation that's so satisfying with charming and adorable characters. Too many to name. I will name the fleas, and I'll name that little guy that you ride on with the fast travel. That guy's adorable. The atmosphere is fantastic. I love when you enter a location and you hear the map bug singing off in the distance somewhere, luring you into her area. I think it's a her. And there's so many new enemies and bosses and side missions, and despite the world being a lot larger than the last game, as I said, it's just a breeze to explore. I never felt too frustrated by that feeling of where do I go next. I mean, no one had to stare at my mugshot while they were eating their morning cereal. It's great! You get that? Cool. This game is the Back to the Future 2 to Back to the Future 1. It's a perfect sequel. It did everything the first one did, but better. And they even kept it at $20. And the fact that this is an indie game just adds to the insanity of how a cheap indie game can take the entire gaming world by storm. If anything else, I'm just really glad that we never have to hear about Silksong at every single Nintendo Direct or press conference or live event. In fact, Team Cherry, if you could do me a favor and not ever announce a third game and just release it one day so that I don't have to hear about that every single Nintendo Direct, that'd be great. But if I can give you a tip, sweetheart, visit the merchant early in the game and buy that compass. It's stellar for finding your way. And
Stella! Hey, Platinum Chip, welcome back in.
I wouldn't worry about buying weapons too early either. They're kind of useless. Yeah, that was a bunch of fantastic cherry puns, specifically cherry types that are only grown in South Australia, or even more specifically, the Adelaide Hills of South Australia. Many awesome things have come from Adelaide. We have Rhea Ripley. She's one. The Moe's Balls. It's a pretty good one. Oh, me. That's a big one for this channel anyway. I feel like I'm forgetting something. Oh, yeah. Team Cherry. Yeah, I think it's important to note here that, one, Team Cherry is based in my hometown, meaning, yeah, the place where I used to buy Yu-Gi-Oh cards and comic books growing up is just one block over from where Hollow Knight and Silksong were recently.
Just dox him harder. Yes, he did call Chakra the merchant, which she kind of is, but not also. YouTube, please. We broke the game. The movie, the game.
Knight and Silksong were recently developed. Number two, there was 2 points here. We're so far away from when I said one, you might have forgotten. But 2, this game was made by 3 people. Ari Gibson, Willem Pellin, and Jack Vine. And yeah, I had to Google if cherries were grown on a vine, and unfortunately they're not. So I can't really make a pun about that. It blows my mind that only 3 people can make all of this, but also This will not only break game store sale records, but also break those same game stores. Because yes, Steam, the eShop, the PlayStation Store, and Microsoft Store, they all crashed on the day that this game released due to the incredibly high demand. And that is just something extremely special, especially when you compare it to AAA big budget titles that are just a flash in the pan. They come and go even after millions of dollars of marketing. Team Cherry barely said anything, dropped the game out of nowhere and broke records. And yet, it took them 7 years. But in their defense, time moves faster in Australia. I don't know if you knew that, because I think like every 7 American years equates to 1 Australian year. Yeah, it's the same math as dog years. That's how I remember it. Also, the toilets flush backwards. But it was 7 years of love from 3 developers who cared passionately about what they were creating. To make some...
I was going to leave it alone, but isn't that the opposite? That the Australian year would be a lot slower? Because you'd have 7 to 1? Anyway.
Fun without all the bells and whistles. Well, actually, no, there is a lot of bells. Just like the 3 indie game developers in my small hometown of Adelaide, Australia, this game rewards you with the hard-earned satisfaction of overcoming nearly impossible odds. The pride in knowing that you did, in fact, get good. Because it's a farmers unionized coffee, or it's nothing.
So that video was alright. I didn't particularly like it. I felt like the beginning was a little bit of a debate. I kind of figured that might happen though. Anyway, I am going to leave the link to Why is Silksong So Hard by Beatmups in the chat if you guys want to counteract my like of a like with a like of your own. And yeah, don't really have too much else to say about that so far. So then next, let's go ahead and jump into second wins. Hollow Knight Silksong's beautiful but baffling designs. Because, what are they?
This episode is sponsored by GameMaker. Yeah, it's finally here, puppy. So, was it worth the wait? You think so? Well, I also enjoyed my time with it, but I have some questions about some of the finer details of its designs. Well, let me explain. In our previous episode on Hollow Knight, we covered how its early game is designed to make the player feel bad, which makes eventually overcoming that challenge feel all the sweeter. But is that still the case with Silksong? Well, we'll get into that, but before I tear into the inner workings of its more unfortunate stuttering cogs, I want to preface that I adored this game. I believe the advancements Team Cherry have made in combat and platforming are monumental and give the player a sense of control I have never seen in a 2D platformer before. The tools, selectable abilities and core moveset give Hornet a cornucopia of ways to counter enemies.
Alright, so that's a pretty good amount of progress they've made. Okay, they even have the enemy here shown off. 12 days ago, okay.
Slams, dashes, and projectiles. The greater emphasis on parrying enemy attacks gives weight to your own, and bosses remain readable even with a bunch of ads thrown in. And abilities...
Man, the Cogwork Dancer fight was so good. Especially the end. So thematic. Platinum, you asked how was the final boss in the ending? You fell asleep before you got to see the conclusion, sadly. The final boss was suitably challenging to me. It took me maybe like a dozen tries, maybe a little bit more. I had fun fighting her. There was a couple moments where it was a little bit disappointing, which I'll leave vague in case anybody isn't there. And nonetheless, I think it was still a really good fight, and the ending was good as well. I don't want to give too much away, though. But the good news, Platinum, is that we always do have the VODs available on the YouTubes for rewatch. You just have to go to the live tab of my channel.
Designed to allow you to quickly re-enter and disengage from the fray, make combat feel so much more fluid. And the same can be said for platforming. You
know what? Yeah, I probably should have used my, what do you call it? Hook shots more often against enemies like that. In the midst of combat. I barely did that. That probably would have been smart to do. So I closed my other window, so I have to open it again. It's an accident. Chadwick hard is harder than normal. That's crazy, brother. All right, let me back this up a little
Incredible. He's designed to allow you to quickly re-enter and disengage from the fray, make combat feel so much more fluid. And the same can be said for platforming. The incredible foundation Hollow Knight laid has been improved upon, taking a simple dash and turning it into a sprint that can be comboed into an extended jump or attack. This combined with the grapple leads to, well, once mechanical mastery settles in, incredibly satisfying movement among the scenery and enemies alike.
Yeah, I'm still kind of astounded that they made the dash and the air dash like one upgrade together, because that's usually bundled into two separate things in a lot of these types of games. And as soon as I got that unlocked, it was just kind of game over, GG for me. Yeah, it just felt so smooth and so good. Mendacious, this video caused a big splash on the Silksong subreddit, if you remember correctly. Okay, cool. Yeah, I figured this one might because it does have a lot of views. And not as much as the others yet, but this is also a little bit newer.
Which is important, as you'll be doing a bunch more backtracking this time around due to Silksong's newly introduced quest system, which encourages more thoughtful exploration that's not wholly centered around the map, and is a fantastic addition to the game. But as much as I fell in love with these systems, my problems begin with how they're all taught to the player. For example, in Hollow Knight, you're not explicitly taught how to pogo jump with your down slash. The closest thing they have is the hidden grub challenge that forces you to pogo off of spikes, and it's the same here in Silksong. There's no dedicated tutorial whatsoever, and you're left to work via trial and error. And to top it all off, in Hollow Knight,
To be fair, I think pogoing off the red things is a little bit easier to intuit than pogoing off of spikes. And I think Silksong probably has the same issue as base Hollow Knights in that regard, and that it isn't always, or that it isn't obvious at all that you can pogo off of spikes. And that did take me a little bit of trial and error, and I did have the advantage of knowing that, at least in the original Hollow Knight, that small spiky spikes were not spiky enough to pogo off of, which did always seem a little bit awkward to me between the two, but regardless.
this action required one input of the analog stick and an attack, but here, for some unfathomable reason, they've given Hornet a diagonal down slash attack depending on her initial facing direction, and then require the player to alter their orientation mid-jump, pushing their analog stick in the desired direction. And because they have the most sensitive dead zone known to man, a lot of time you'll just simply attack instead of down slashing, sending you to your thorny doom. And to add a cherry on top of that, because it's a diagonal attack,
A cherry on top of that. I see what they did there.
the positional requirement of the player is doubled, as it's no longer simply a horizontal adjustment to align yourself with the object, but also directional, with tight room for error. And they led with this design. And what I mean
Yeah, I do think that was a very bold choice on their part. I don't know if it was the best choice, though.
by this is the game actually becomes infinitely easier in this regard once you find the Reaper or Wanderer's Crests, which alter Hornet's moveset and playstyle and replace her diagonal down attack with the Knight's original one. So why they choose to open the game with the one attack that the majority of people are going to have the most issues with? Because it closely lines up with Hornet's moveset from Hollow Knight boss fights? Well, yeah, that's true, but was that worth it? Its design discourages players from using it in combat.
Man, I forgot how she actually moved. That's how I wish the jump, or the down air would have worked.
True, but was that worth it?
That she would go all the way. Well, that kind of sucked. Thanks, YouTube.
Hornet's moveset
That she would
from
go all
Hollow
the
Knight
way
boss
in
fights.
Silksong.
Yeah, that's true, but was that worth it? Its design
Frickin' YouTube. Okay, whatever.
discourages players from using it in combat due to its complexity compared to the alternatives, leading a lot of players, well, especially new ones, to not utilizing it as intended. This can also be seen.
I wonder if her jump height is consistent between the two games.
True, but was that
Hello, girl.
worth it? Its design
No, I think she does get a little bit more height, but that's fine.
discourages players from using it in
Although, well, she'd poke it off.
combat due to its complexity compared to the alternatives.
I was just wondering, because the original Hollow Knight himself is so small, that she might have the actual same height parameters, but the scale of Farloom is just a little bit different than Hallownest.
leading a lot of players, well especially new ones, to not utilizing it as intended. This can also be seen in the grapple using silk, which, yeah, makes sense thematically, but just means if you have limited silk, which is common, you have to wait on hooks for it to replenish, leading to a lot of downtime. And
that can be a little bit awkward, and I think that ties into one of my issues of silk regenerating, cheesing, by going into a room, hitting an enemy a couple times, and walking back out, and then walking back in. I almost think it would have been nice to have included like a bit of a meditative ability, or what I thought made the most sense to me was being able to regenerate silk from using the needle in. I was flabbergasted that using the needle in actually cost silk, because I don't really think it added much to the game, to be honest, and it may have detracted a little bit. Broccoli, welcome into the stream. You think you would have had a good time with the game if you hadn't sequence broken and then gambled with the silk and found the Wanderer's Crest? It sounds like you may have had a bit of a similar experience that I did, because I sequence broke pretty early and I got the Reaper and then the Wanderer, and I just kind of used the Wanderer for the rest of the game, but I didn't not enjoy it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Oh, you think you wouldn't have had as good a time? Okay, I see what you're saying now. Thank you.
this is the thing, when you use the grapple in combat, hitting an enemy will refund the silk that you spent, making it effectively free. Well, yes, if you do have enough silk, you can use the grapple twice in the air, this is true, but because the developers can never fully account for how much silk a player will have at any one point in time, they cannot incorporate double grapples into legit platforming challenges without a hoop or an enemy to reset them and regain that silk. So why does the grapple cost silk at all? Completely removing the silk cost and having the grapple's usage reset once you remain stationary or hit an enemy would encourage more of its uses in combat and also completely stop this hoop downtime. Yes, this is a tiny detail, but these things add up when you're trying to condition and teach your players silently. In an ideal world, you want your players to utilize.
Not sure that part of the game was as big a deal as they seem to be making it out right here. I definitely appreciate the point that he's making about the awkward downtime on the hoops. And then you could make the argument that maybe having the first 3 points of silk regenerate faster could be enough to account for that. But it also makes sense that they wanted to slow down the generation of silk, because if there was literally no cost to grappling, you could literally just grapple across the entire game and not really have to worry about most platforming sections after you got the platform, like, what's it called? The putrefied ducts. You'll just be able to zoom across the top of the map without having to worry about the bottom, provided... Well, if it was like free, but at least there is some cost for doing that. Like, you still can do it, but at least it costs you something with the current development of things. I don't know. Broccoli, you're really enjoying the game, but there's definitely some baffling design decisions here and there. I do think for me the biggest baffling design decision was having the initial pogo be at an angle, but that doesn't bother me as much as just having the downward portion of the attack be so brief in comparison to everything else. Galamoth, you never had to grapple and didn't have silk? Like, you don't even know there was a downtime? It happened to me a couple times, and when I noticed that I was low on silk, I just kind of adjusted on the fly and figured it out. It wasn't that tedious to me. And then after a while, you just kind of get a little bit used to the timing of the silk regenerating regardless.
Is all of their platforming and combat options as much as they possibly can, because that's where the fun is. I cannot stress how fluid and satisfying the movement is once you get used to all of this, and I promise that you will eventually get good at it because of how unbelievable the boss runs are. Now, a lot of people have been complaining about Silksong's difficulty as of late, but to be honest, it's not that difficult. And now, before you say get in line for the shower, you sweaty beast, what I'm trying to say is that Silksong isn't difficult per se, it's punishing. Think of difficulty in terms of a puzzle. It could be incredibly difficult, but there is no punishment involved for failure to understand or execute the solution. Enjoyment comes from overcoming that, whereas punishment has nothing to do with the inherent challenge. For example, getting over it. It's extremely simple to play.
See, I don't agree with this take, but before going into that, I want to wish Robbie a good night. Thanks for joining us, and take care. Hopefully we'll see you on the next one. But yeah, as far as Silksong being punishing, I didn't really get that vibe, and I say that playing on one of the earlier patches where they hadn't tooled down the environmental damages. So of my time playing the game, I think I've only lost my rosaries in 2 occasions. The first time that I was losing my rosaries was when I was deliberately trying to out of sequence a certain area and fighting an incredibly difficult enemy for that point in the game, plus one of his friends, which is a little bit tankier. And I died a couple times doing that because of it being a pretty difficult thing to do to begin with. And then the other time that I lost my rosaries was really late in the game, and I was just being careless and not really worried about my rosaries because they didn't really matter that much at that point anymore. But anyway, that isn't to say that nobody's never going to lose their rosaries, but in terms of like actual punishment, it wasn't that bad, especially when you could resort to cheesing enemies to regain silk. But that's kind of more of the issue that I had, which I just kind of feel like a bit of a broken record at this point. Mendacious, you think Silksong makes getting good not fun sometimes, or it's hard in a way that isn't enjoyable at times? Do any of those moments stand out to you specifically? Because I think conceptually I could agree with you, but I'm just not sure if what you're saying is what I have in mind.
Mechanically, but if you make one mistake, you could lose hours of progress. So how does Silksong punish its players? Well, firstly...
And yeah, that's kind of the way that I think about it. Like, the punishment in Silksong is very easy to recover from, which to me makes it not that punishing. Like, there were definitely times when I got to bosses and was down to 1 mask, I'm like, oh god, I'm getting punished for playing poorly. And then if I just chilled and eased up a bit and took more deliberate shots and then jumped in the air to heal, I kind of recovered. So I felt like the punishment was actually at a really good threshold for me specifically.
Nearly all bosses do 2 damage per hit, which is certainly a choice. This can also be seen in certain environment hazards, but I genuinely believe that this might be, pun intended, a bug. Because you're not taking 2 damage from these thorns, you're taking 1 damage twice. Now, some hazards are 100% designed to do 2 damage. Lava, for example, has a specific charm to take its damage down from 2 to 1, but when you fall into lava, it does all of its damage in 1 instance rather than 2. I think they may have forgotten to activate invulnerability when the player hits a hazard as they transition.
I think they're just completely wrong on this point. Obviously, Team Cherry did go back and change it. But to me, like, it makes the most sense that a hazard that does not reset your screen should probably deal 1 point of damage, whereas one which does reset the player's position should cost 2. These cogs reset the player's position, so it makes sense to me that they'd be extra punishing
them to the temporary checkpoint, so as you remain inside the hurt box of that hazard, you take another instance of damage. That's food for thought, but it is unmistakably intentional in boss designs though. And yes, in Hollow Knight, some bosses did 2 damage too, but only late game ones, and they did so to show size, intensity of the attack, and scale the game based on player acquired health. But here, nearly all bosses...
I was going to say, there's also a big difference between the way that you heal in Hollow Knight 1 and Silksong. It was a lot easier to heal in the original Hollow Knight, which is probably why Silksong felt a lot more punishing to players. It was long enough ago that I played a Hollow Knight that I didn't really care about taking 2 masks of damage. Like, it never truly felt bad to me in Silksong. But I was kind of blindsided when I first heard people complaining about the 2 mask hits. I'm like, oh, that's a big deal? Why? And then, because they were like, well, it wasn't like this in Hollow Knight. But I'm like, well, this is Silksong. It's a different game. So maybe it's just a little bit of a mismanagement of expectations from people who played the original. Galamoth, you often choke when you take damage and then you just keep getting hit. Sometimes, yeah, that can happen. You get tilted and it can be hard to recover. But that's just part of gaming. As long as you don't give up, you can make it. Mendacious, the health yo-yoing between empty and full isn't fun either. Team Cherry has said it's intentional too. Broccoli said, the weird thing about taking 2 masks by default from bosses is that you start with an odd number of masks, so the first upgrade doesn't do anything when you most need it to. Yeah, I'm not the most thrilled with the way that the healing works in Silksong because it takes a long time to activate, and it's only 3 masks unless you're using like the tools and whatnot. So I think just the amount of life that you start off with feels really weird because it feels bad to heal if you're only missing 1 mask because of how long it takes to set up and how long it takes to regenerate your silk, because it's more cost effective to wait until you take 3 masks of damage to try to heal, but then you're in danger of being 1 or 2 shot, which isn't that difficult to happen. And so there really is a fine line of trying to decide when to heal. And it's even worse earlier on because this dude actually has extra masks at this point. But yeah, the healing itself could just be the problem rather than the damage, I think. But it'd be interesting to see like what other solutions to this kind of problem there would be. Broccoli, you like the risk and reward evaluation for healing? I do too, to an extent. I just wish that we might have had a second bar for abilities as well.
Big or small, do 2 damage, dramatically making the game more punishing, and there's not a lot of room for growth scaling-wise either. When introductory bosses do as much damage as Absolute Radiance does at the end of Hollow Knight, it starts to feel a little bit inflated in that department. And it's not even just the attacks. Making bodily contact with bosses also does 2 damage, which goes further to discourage usage.
That one was more of an attack. I don't believe he's right here that if you run into an enemy, you take 2 points. I'm pretty sure it was 1. But maybe I'm wrong there. I guess I don't really remember. Because I certainly did it a lot with my strat of sprinting at bosses and doing the double wanderer attack, dash attack. I don't know. Logos, you're saying tons of people are self-reporting their skill issues and getting filtered from enjoying the game? Maybe. I don't know if that's necessarily a good or a bad thing, though. I definitely think it's a little bit unfortunate for those who had their expectations set so heavily by Hollow Knight 1. But now I'm curious about like what brand new players to the franchise feel about its difficulty. It depends on the boss, Broccoli. Maybe that could make sense.
Of the movement abilities that transport you towards the boss, which, let me check my notes, is most of them. All of this basically halves the player's health from 6 to 3, making it incredibly difficult for players to
What?
transport you towards the boss, which it's not even just the attacks. Making bodily contact with bosses also does 2 damage, which goes further to discourage usage of the movement abilities that transport you towards the boss, which, let me check my notes, is most of them. All of this basically
Okay, so he's saying if you try to needle the boss and then you get hit contacted and then they do an attack, you'll take 2 more damage, so that's half your health with that 6 life threshold. However, then that just kind of disproves that running and clanking the boss deals 2 initially. Anyway,
halves the player's health from 6 to 3, making it incredibly difficult for players to actually learn the fights. And these issues are just
that point right there is a little bit wrong, and that's just an issue of the approach.
compounded upon with all of the changes made to how healing works. Previously, the knight could spend a portion of a resource to heal a single mask of damage, but in Silksong, the player has to build up to a specific amount of silk before they can execute a large free mask heal, which seems like a net positive, right? Well, just like with the first game, if you're hit mid-heal, you lose all of the resource you were attempting to use, which is fine when it's only 1/5 of the total.
I do wish that later on, when you have enough to heal twice, essentially, that if you got hit during your heal, you didn't lose all of your silk, but only enough that would have gone into that initial heal, because it does feel a little bit unnecessary to lose that much. Although, if they want to punish the player for just like healing out in a risky position, I guess that's fine, but it didn't particularly feel great to me as the player. Global, your reflexes are kind of slow, which is why you're bad about getting cornered in a lot of situations that people can dash out of easily. Okay. How did that affect your experience playing Silksong? I thought you really enjoyed it.
But in Silksong, you lose over half of your entire resource bar and have to build back up to it all over again, meaning you're probably cooked for the rest of the fight. This also completely discourages players from attempting to use Silk abilities due to how much you need to build up for a heal, and this
I agree with this point here, yeah.
is only exacerbated by the 2 damage issue and leads to a lot of rage-inducing deaths, which isn't helped by the lengthy and sometimes challenging in their own right runbacks to the boss arenas. These can range anywhere from 30 seconds to 4 minutes in length, with their own sets of enemies, hazards and challenges. Every mistake making your chances of actually killing the boss crumble before you. They are extremely frustrating, but as many players have claimed, they're not here to simply waste the player's time. They are 100% intentional, and we have proof. So for
Oh god, that sucks, going that far to just fail right there at the end. Yeah, I might have felt differently had I gone the initial judge route up and had to deal with it. And I could definitely see that being a little bit fatiguing at that point in the game. Broccoli, you said about the silk thing, you didn't have rosary issues because you haven't lost them, but you can imagine the benches being paid causing some problems. Yeah, we were talking about that with the last video as well. I do think that can be a legitimate grievance, especially if a player isn't super keen on exploring a lot or having a lot of rosaries on hand. There was a time, I think, where I had met Chakra, and then the rest point was in the next room over or something, like really nearby, and then I didn't have enough to spend it, which felt a little bit bad. And oh man, he's probably going to bring up this point as well, like the actual mimic benches in Sinner's Road were pretty rough to deal with, but I was really lucky that they didn't kill me when I encountered them. I could definitely see people losing some salt over this for sure. Global, you love Silksong, but the fights like the Flower Lady, the last boss, and the Bilehaven boss took you a very, very long time to beat. Okay. Flower Lady. Oh, Sister Splinter? Or... oh, the actual Flower Lady with the platforms. Yeah, that one is actually a little bit rougher for me, too. Galamoth, you say there is no 4-minute run back? No way. I could see the run back to the frog being potentially 4 minutes if you're not super proficient at platforming, or maybe even going back up to the judge if depending on what movement options you have.
example, this run back to the climactic boss in Sinner's Road is incredibly long, even taunting you with a broken bench halfway through. So is this designed to deliberately waste your time? Well, there are other examples even within this very run back of
I'll look back at the map.
even taunting you.
Damn it.
Run back to the climactic.
The boss in Sinner's Road? Oh, this one? That one wasn't that bad of a run back. Like, it is annoying. I do think that this one really is kind of annoying and probably one of the worst. Because I thought he was talking about some point over here, because you do have the rest point this way, which I think is an even worse way to come back. And that is one of my complaints. I do wish Sinner's Road had a bell station, just because of how awkward it can be traversing to there specifically. Broccoli's Sister Splinter was the one where you ended up dying due to collision damage, doing more damage than you expected? Okay.
Climactic boss in Sinner's Road is incredibly long, even taunting you with a broken bench halfway through. So is this designed to deliberately waste your time? Well, there are other examples even within this very run back of the developers deliberately minimizing the player's wasted time.
So here's a bit of a hot take, but a different perspective perhaps. I think some of these boss run backs are pseudo practice for certain things you can do later in the game, like navigating the parcel runs. Those will feel a lot worse if these run backs weren't as bad, but by the same token, you could potentially one-shot or two-shot the bosses and not really have to worry about it. So there's a little bit of a pro and a con to having the long run backs because it makes you a little bit more proficient at moving through the different areas. And generally speaking, I don't think they were that bad, but I've also played Dark Souls 2.
For example,
Yeah, that's true, Broccoli. You do not have to fight all the enemies along the way, but most people do. Yeah, once you realize that, that was probably going to be a bit of a shift in mentality for a lot of players. But because I personally have had like a lot of experience with the runbacks in the FromSoft games, I know that I can just skip the trash unless I want to farm a little bit of a resource on the way back to the bosses. But that's a good point. Hey, D&D Hydrate, nice to see you again. The only run back you didn't like too much was the Hunter March arena room early on. Other than that, you don't care too much? The arena room. Yeah, Hunter's March is also an awkward area to get to. I think of the two locations that should have had bell locations, for me, Hunter's March and Sinner's Rise are definitely up there.
the elevator that begins this journey has a full travel time of this, but if you call it from below, they shorten the time for it to appear by a third, meaning they spent extra care and attention to detail to make sure calling this elevator wasn't wasting your time, meaning the runbacks are intentionally designed to be punishing, and this has a lot to do with thematics. The famously brutal run-up to the Last Judge has been complained about ad nauseum online, but I guarantee you its punishing nature was intentional, so you'd lose all of your rosaries attempting to fight them, which is all in service of the thematics of the following area, the Underworks, which has a theme of capitalist cogwork nightmare with benches that are pay per use, like some kind of penny stand-up. Let's see how many fellow Dickensian orphans get that.
Yeah, I think the cost of the temporary benches did a lot for the thematics, but they could have also reduced the cost to like 15 rosaries for some of the other benches throughout the world, and that probably would have felt a little bit better. But it definitely felt like the game was very, very finely balanced to be good on rosary costs if you did explore everything fully, at least for the experience of my playthrough, which is definitely going to be more filled with exploration than most other experiences. So Logos, you think Silksong was too easy for you and that there's no boss that was super tough, unlike in Hollow Knight? I kind of agree with you to an extent. There were a couple points where I was like, oh man, this is almost like Grim, but then it didn't quite hit the same difficulty threshold, which is probably good for a lot of players for like a base game run, but I was wanting a little bit more. The final fight was kind of closer, but still, in my mind, a bit easier than the original Hollow Knight bosses as well. Galamos says, that's true, but all of those are added later. Yes, I'm also keeping that in mind. Logos first Sinner was the highlight, but you wanted more. Same here. I like that fight a lot. Mendacious, you think the attitude around runbacks in general are shifting to them being needless and just being in the way?
Joke. This nickel and diming you for benches and the added tension that brings to the area wouldn't work if you were flush with rosary beads, hence why the Last Judge and its brutal runback are designed the way they are. The pain and frustration caused by these runbacks can also encourage more thoughtful exploration, like with the broken bench I mentioned before in Sinner's Road, that seems to be an evil joke until you explore and realize it can be fixed, which is extremely rewarding, but this isn't always the case.
And that one isn't obvious. I did figure it out, but I could have figured it out sooner, we can say. D, you say it's funny you got to Last Judge pretty late. Same here. I felt a little bit bittersweet about that because it's nice to be able to one-shot a boss, but a little bit bitter because I didn't quite get the experience that other people had gotten going through the front way. And I had a little bit of a higher upgraded weapon, I think, at that point.
Scene with one of my biggest frustrations with Silksong, currencies. But before we do that, Ludo, we need to make some IRL beads by shouting out today's sponsor. This video is brought to you by GameMaker. If you've ever wanted to get into game development, GameMaker does this really crazy thing where it's free. Just start making and only pay when you want to release your game to the world commercially.
It's fast, it's user-friendly, and there's easy-to-follow tutorials, plus a dedicated community to help answer even my questions. How make man jump? GameMaker is a 2D game engine that's helped bring some of yours and my favorite recent experiences to life, like UFO 50, Chicory, Anton Blast, and of course, Yahtzee's own Starstruck Vagabond.
Ooh, we talking about GameMaker? I love that program, it's so easy to use. As well as Starstruck Vagabond, I also used it to make all 12 projects in my 12 games in 12 months Dev Diary challenge. And I couldn't believe how much sex I got out of that. None.
Okay.
I got none at all, which I couldn't believe.
So what are you waiting for? Head on over to the GameMaker link in the description and start cracking away today, because we want to play your game.
Yeah, looking through this list, I'm seeing one of you made Armpit Fart Tycoon, and I've got several questions for you. Now, currencies. We spoke about it in my last episode, how Geo encouraged enemy engagement and gave the player something meaningful they could lose on death, increasing the tension felt during gameplay, and that is still the case here with beads. The issue begins with the introduction of a secondary currency / resource with these shell shards. One of these things is not like the other. Shards are used as donations in certain questlines and as a refill for certain tools. You don't lose these on death, but if you run out of them, you cannot use your tools at all, which for one disincentivizes their use in combat till you're fully committed to a fight, which is hard to gauge at the best of times. But
Yeah, I can agree with that point there, that it isn't always obvious when you should be using your tools, especially when they cost two types of resources, and that's kind of why I stopped using them as much. And I probably would have used my tools a bit more often if they didn't cost shell shards on top of it. So the game was passively pushing me to not relying on them, which might be what the devs want, but then it's like, well, why not just make the shard cost not a thing and then lower the frequency in which we could use the tools? Because for me, that's always been a bit of a weird experience when you have two resources for one tool effectively. And I think it was a really big problem in Sekiro because you're already limited to the amount of tools you can use per rest session. So then why make players farm for spirit emblems? Because that's just going to disincentivize using them if you're not good at using them, and make it harder to get good using them when you're punished for doing so. And I think Silksong might have a similar kind of problem going on in that regard. So at least for this point of the video, I could agree that it is a bit of a baffling design decision. Mendacia says, if a mechanic discourages you from engaging with it, then that's a flaw in your opinion. Yeah, I do have mixed feelings about the healing system with the abilities tacked into it, because at least there is a bit of a risk reward, and there were times that I was like, okay, well, I just want to try to spam abilities to deal a lot of damage at once, and then I would be in a bit of trouble and not be able to heal effectively later. And that, to me, is a bit more forgiving than this one here. Broccoli, you'd pretty much only use them for long range. Like, specifically if there's an enemy on the way that's in a tricky position because they're far away. Yeah, the tool that I used most often was the Flint Slate, which is purely for buffing my melee, so I was even less incentivized to do it unless I knew the enemy was particularly tanky, or if I was in a combat arena and trying to get rid of certain threats efficiently. D, you didn't have too many issues, but you agree you would have liked if the tools were weaker, but they had more uses? Okay.
the issues don't stop there. Enemies either drop beads and shards on death, or only shards, depending on if they would thematically have little bug pockets to hold their spare change. So if you're full of shards and enemies don't drop beads, there is very little incentive to engage with them at all. And an additional issue with this is that for large stretches of gameplay, no beads can be acquired at all. So a lot of the time...
Yeah, that's kind of the issue that was a little bit strange to me, that there was... literally, they just said there were stretches where you weren't really gaining any beads, and then it's like, well, wait a second. What am I doing fighting these guys? They don't drop anything. And then, like, that doesn't necessarily feel good. There's nothing, super wrong about it, though. So I feel a little bit conflicted. I guess it makes sense if, the Crow dudes dropped currency, I should say rosaries, because they give you rosaries at the end of the game. I don't remember if these dudes do drop them or not. I think they do. Maybe they don't.
Time you'll end up getting to a bench that requires a certain amount of beads to unlock, and the entire area you've just trekked through dropped 0, unless you've been paying your bead taxes like a good little capitalist bug. This was a personal problem for me when I was doing the Mount Frey Icy platforming gauntlet. I got to what I thought was the halfway point and luckily found a bench, but had not a single bead to my name because no mobs dropped any on the way up. I was
Understandable.
done for. I even popped my post-tax bead threads and still didn't have enough. But the developers thought of this. Kind of. There's a hidden room of beads right next door to the bench, but guess what? It still isn't enough. 87!
Oh man, that's freaking funny. If that would have been a really smart design decision to have like the amount that you need in the next room over, but to have it just be ever so slightly short, that is devious. That's funny.
But out of 90, you've got to be pulling my mandibles, mate. What do you want me to do? Pick myself up by my silken bootstraps and carry on? Or gamble for them, because I bloody will? Or, I don't know, tactically unalive myself in the icy depths, track back to the bell station, go to a completely different area to farm beads, come all the way back up the hellish gauntlet again, just to have enough for a single bench?
Do the enemies in the slab not drop any rosaries? I guess it makes sense. Well, maybe the jailers have some? I don't know.
Yeah, you'd have to be...
Broccoli, in your opinion, the problem is the benches don't have a constant, predictable price. That's actually a really good point, to be honest, because if you knew that you would always need 50 for a bench, or if you picked up that they tended to cost 50, then you might be incentivized to try to keep 50 on you at a time, or 80. I do think 80 is a little bit steep. I do like the temporary cost in the Grand Cathedral only being 15 for the temporary ones, but you bring up a good point.
You're not a twat to do that. Why do only certain enemies drop beads? Is this to stop farming? Well, because not all enemies drop them, you need to go to specific areas to kill specific enemies, which is the definition of farming. I absolutely adored 90% of the game's designs, but all of these specific ones baffled me to no end, feeling like a regression from what came before them, and
Yeah, looking back, I don't know if farming necessarily improved my experience. It was just kind of a means to an end. And like I was saying when I was completing the game the last 2 nights, I would have enjoyed the Hunter's Journal more if it would be quote-unquote completed by having each enemy in the world correspond to the amount needed to complete the journal entry. So for example, let's say you had 4 Elder Pilgrim entries in the journal, then there should be at least 4 Elder Pilgrims throughout the world to kill. And you wouldn't have to go back and farm an area multiple times just to fill it out. D, you felt it was obvious that mostly humanoid bug enemies or pilgrims dropped the beads. I think it becomes obvious the further you get into the game, and because when I was first starting out, I wasn't really paying attention to what currency I was getting from what, but it was later on when I was spending the currency that I started putting 2 and 2 together, where like the non-sentient bugs didn't have rosaries. Broccoli, you like that they don't, but in your opinion, they had to choose either the long stretches without beads or not having benches work like they do, but they went with both. Yeah. So I think your point about having a constant price could be a good way to kind of help set some player expectations.
keep going over in my head of why they were made, and I think a lot of it comes down to narrative cohesion valued over the play experience. Hornet's grapple must use Silk because that's what it uses narratively. She must start with a diagonal downslash because that's what she had in the first game. Runbacks in areas must be brutal to convey the capitalist downfall of this corrupt bug kingdom that uses honks and doots to communicate, and this bug can't drop beads because it's female and therefore her jorts have no pockets. Narratively, it all makes sense, but my question is, would it make the game a lot more fun if those buggy jorts did in fact have pockets? But what do you think?
I don't really think it matters. I think it just comes down to a bit of balancing between how many rosaries get dropped by the enemies. Because let's say that the amount of rosaries that you get remains the same, but it's just spread around all of the enemies. Like, you're still effectively going to have the same issue, with the exception of getting to an area where you literally can't farm any rosaries, like Mount Fae. I think they do bring up a pretty solid point there, that you don't actually have enough rosaries in the immediate vicinity to unlock that rest point. That is a little bit problematic. Maybe they touched it. I don't know. But, yeah, I don't know.
In what area has Silksong made improvements on its predecessor, and in what ways has it regressed? Let us know down below, because we would love to discuss this with you. Oi, Ludes, I just checked and I saw that you're not in the Second Wind Patreon. And can I tell you, Missy, that you are missing out? We have Patreon Hangout movie nights, we have exclusive experimental videos, and a bunch of other goodies that you could be involved in, but I guess you're too busy with, I don't know, not having thumbs. Well, yeah, that is fair. You do work here too. Okay, yeah, I'll get you added to that after this. All right, time to say.
Okay, so Lunar Patriots, welcome into the stream. You say there are enough rosaries in Mount Fae, though? Are there? Okay, if there are, then I will take back what I said about it being an issue. So it just really was a skill issue where they died and they didn't get good? If that's the case, then I will just accept that.
Say goodbye, Lulu. All right, bye, guys.
Above the locked bench and to the direct right? Okay. Yeah, because there are strings up there, aren't there? Okay. Whoops.
Hey, do you too think there's a lot of bullshit going on with the YouTube algorithm? Why not buy our new algorithm
can't I go
t-shirt from
back?
dftba.com to express...
Oh, is this a new window? This is probably a new window. Okay. Okay, guys, that was Second Wind's Hollow Knight. Silksong's beautiful but baffling designs. I'm going to go ahead and link the video to you guys if you want to give them a like and or a subscribe. Wait, I thought I was subscribed to Second Wind. Definitely watched enough of their stuff to be subscribed. Anyway, yeah, I did enjoy the video. There were parts of it that I, disagreed with, but that's fine. That happens. But overall, I thought there were some pretty good points here. And there are a couple baffling decisions that they brought up that I agree with. So, Broccoli, you agree that this game is very uncompromising in the sense of putting its lore in the gameplay. For me, I think the one thing that would super fix a lot of Silksong would be having the Needle-In regenerate your silk if you used it. Because it's not something that you can really engage with during combat, but it would help alleviate the moments where you would cheese going between rooms and trying to farm up enough silk to heal back to full and whatnot. Do you feel like at this point in the game you were like banking rosaries for any check in unknown areas? Yeah, I just like to explore, so I wasn't ever really too hard up for the rosaries, but due to the way that I learned to what's the word? Not interface, connect with, whatever, that I learned to play the Dark Souls games, I always thought it was a good idea to just hold on to my consumable souls or runes or blood echoes by keeping them in my reserve until I'm trying to level up, and then just using enough to meet the next level up threshold if I went back to the respective bonfire of each game. Lunar says, Needle-In can cheese, you can stun lock enemies if it's timed right. So you guess the non-regeneration is a balancing thing? Yeah, I think so. Like, it could be fixed. D, when you say banking, you were just converting them into strings? See, I did not actually like doing that because you were losing some rosaries on the conversions. Whereas if you just didn't die enough, you never really lost the rosaries. So it's a good strat. If you don't die, you don't lose resources. Who'd have figured? Okay, so let's go ahead and check out the last video for tonight with Hollow Knight Silksong's design philosophy is puzzling by Type 2 Productions.
Wanted to suit your playstyle.
I did not watch it this far. And this one came out 10 days ago, so it's a little bit more recent. And this one is by... Oh yeah, I did say Type 2 Productions. Okay.
We've both spent a large portion of the last week and a half playing Hollow Knight Silksong, and it's obvious this game was made with a ton of love and passion, but it feels like it's a significant downgrade from the first game, and it's a real disappointment for me.
I agree with that. The art style is still gorgeous, the OST is amazing, they address the lack of color from the first Hollow Knight, the character animations are all top-notch, and there is a ton of attention to these little small details all throughout the world that really make it feel alive and reactive. But unfortunately, what Team Cherry decided to do is to take the worst elements of the first game and lean into those hard.
Oh man, I was about to say I liked what they were saying there, and I'm glad that they brought attention to those, because the other videos that we've watched so far, I haven't done it. But yeah, I remember starting up Silksong and just kind of marveling at the moss kind of shifting underneath the weight of Hornet, which was really nice, and then the environments do look really good and whatnot. What quality is this video? Is it just low? Yeah, let's try to bump it up to 1080. Okay, no, it's just probably the compression making it look worse. Galamoth, you say this is random, but you think you got the worst version of the silk shot from the architect? It's inaccurate and weak. I got that one as well, and can confirm it did seem a little bit weak. I did not use it very much at all, though, so maybe it's a little bit better than I'm giving it credit for. Lunar said it's not that much, just 20 rosaries, right? 140 to buy the 120 in Bell Heart. It depends which one you do. Like the mechanical ones, the 80 cost ones give you 60 back, I think. So 20 might not sound like that much, but it's 25% of the rosaries in the conversion rating there. Whereas that one, it's like a sixth of the cost. As far as weird decisions go, you think the first entry into Hunter's March has got to be it? Yeah, I do think Hunter's March is truly the point where a lot of players are going to get filtered.
Those elements being the Souls-like inspirations.
Oh yes. Leave it to the Souls kids to ruin everything you love.
Totally new phenomenon that's never happened before.
Yeah, Team Cherry, they went out of their way to make this game feel unnecessarily frustrating, overly punishing, and needlessly tedious. It really feels like the cult of FromSoft convinced Team Cherry that more AIDS equals a better game. And
I don't know why. I mean, I do know why FromSoft gets all this criticism, but I mean, part of me wonders if these dudes have ever played games like the original Mega Man games or, hell, Metroid. Just any of the classic platformers, Shinobi. Because boss fights, like, Hollow Knight doesn't feel like a complete departure from the genre at all.
even some of the extremely basic quality of life improvements that could have been made to the first game, for whatever reason, are missing in this one.
I have several questions regarding choices they made in this game. Why do we still have to waste an equipment slot on the compass just to be able to see ourselves on the map? Why did we get rid of...
Because you can just get good and know where you are on the map. Yeah. D, you already can't stand this video. It does seem like they're stretching to complain to me, but maybe their complaints are valid. I'm willing to hear people out, and part of the reason why I wanted to do this kind of video is to just try to ascertain like what criticisms seem valid versus what people are saying and how these comments might be influencing others' perceptions. Because pretty much everything we've looked at so far has been really moderate, because I couldn't really find a video that had a ton of views early on that seemed to truly be complaining about difficulty. And so this is one of the more recent ones and doesn't have nearly as many views as the others. So apparently my understanding of the difficulty arguments is that it doesn't seem to be as big a deal as people are making it out to be, or it's just like a stupid subreddit or Steam review problem.
The iframe dash when bosses and enemies in this game hit harder, move faster, and spam more projectiles than they did in the first game? And why did we replace the charm system from the first game with the new crests and tools in this game that offer even less customization?
I would love to know. Genuinely, I would love to know. Because, like, we both...
I agree that I do appreciate having the crests a little bit more, sorry, the charms a little bit more than having the crests. However, to play devil's advocate, you might have a bit of a more replayability added into the game with the different playstyles afforded via the crests. Although that might be a bit of a shallow comparison, because all you're doing is essentially the same thing with attacking left, right, or down, or a charge attack on occasion. And it might not really be nearly as impactful as how the charms could completely transform the way you played in the original Hollow Knight, like being a tanky build and farting everywhere, or having a much faster nail and attacking quickly. So, anyway. Yeah, I do think there actually is less customization in Silksong than in the original Hollow Knight.
Thought the first Hollow Knight was a very solid game, and after 7 years of development for Silksong, a lot of the new choices really are baffling.
And let it be known, we both can really appreciate how well polished Silksong is, but it has so many flaws that hold it back from being the enjoyable sequel that I think we were both hoping for, because despite liking a lot of things that it does, we'll really be focusing more on some of the negative aspects, because you're probably not going to get that from many people talking about this game, because they all seem to be obsessed with doing tricks on this game's needle. But let's not waste any more time and just get right into the details of some of these puzzling choices.
All right, I can appreciate them trying to temper the players, or not the player, the viewers' expectations here. And I was going to say something else about that, but I lost it. Oh well, I lost it. Brocky, you could have a long nail and a fast nail in Hollow Knight. Can't have that combo here because it's too good.
Also, quick spoiler warning, we're not going to talk any story, but we may show footage of later game areas or bosses, so if you're super sensitive to that, just warning you now. The two ones that stick out to me immediately are the combination of Hornet's health pool and how much damage she takes, as well as the reworked healing mechanics. Hornet taking 2 masks per hit from most bosses, some of the basic enemies, and even a good amount of late game platforming sections is absurd. Now let it be known, as a
See, I feel like this is the issue that I was talking about earlier, where if all you're expecting is Hollow Knight 1 but different, then your expectations are kind of kneecapping you from the get-go. And I genuinely wonder how many completely new players to the franchise would even give a damn about taking 2 points of damage, other than it just being like, oh wow, that's kind of like a lot. Or I don't really think it's going to show up on the radar to nearly the same degree as these guys. Which isn't to say that their feelings are completely invalidated, but what would they feel the same way if Hornet's health bar was visually reduced in half, but you only took 1 mask of damage? That's kind of the one thing that I wonder about. But of course, that's a completely different balancing issue, because if you reduce the max health by half, you don't really get the 1 mask of damage that you currently have. Anyway, I explained that poorly, but whatever.
the recording is this, the devs are nerfing and patching some of the environmental damage, but we only played the vanilla version of the game, so that's what we're going to be talking about. And because of this change, bosses and enemies have become far more punishing and frustrating than actually difficult, especially in these new combat arenas the game has introduced.
Yeah, it feels like the game really pushed.
See, I felt like the opposite, where the combat arenas in the original Hollow Knight felt a little bit more punishing, because I felt like I had less tools to mitigate some of these earlier game arenas, or even like the later game ones. Like some combinations of the charms weren't working as well as I wanted, whereas I felt like Hornet's basic kit was so fully functional that it didn't really matter too much what I had on, except to just kind of curate the edge cases of my combat, I guess. Mendacious, you say there's a ton of arenas for some reason. I don't really feel like we have more arenas than in the original Hollow Knight, but maybe I'm wrong there. High Halls PTSD. See, I didn't have any issues with High Halls because I was worried about Garmond dying, because I actually had him on my quest. I didn't want to have him, but I was afraid that if I didn't do his quest, it would, or if I didn't invite him, it would like break his quest or something. So I just bum rushed the absolute crap out of it and managed to one-shot it.
Pushes you into playing, in a weird way, paradoxically, both safer and more reckless at the same time. Because it seems like this game becomes more about playing it safe and limiting your attacks to swipe once or twice, because getting hit now is so punishing. Like, starting the game with 5 masks means that for the majority of enemies, and every boss past the tutorial boss, you can only take 3 hits. So this game completely...
Why is it only 3? Like, that seems like a decent amount to me. I mean, 3 strikes are out. It just seems like mentally such an ingrained thing that I'm a little bit surprised at this criticism.
Devalues even having 5 masks. Like, you might as well start with having 3 and have every enemy only hit for 1 mask. And what this also means.
So they are making my point. But then, like, that changes nothing functionally. It actually makes your heals worse because then you can't, if you only take 1 mask of damage now, you can heal that up, whereas you couldn't do that in the other system. So you do functionally have less effective HP depending on certain thresholds.
Is that any time you get another mask upgrade, they feel totally pointless since you can still only take 3 hits from the majority.
I do kind of agree with this to an extent, except for the edge cases where you get the odd number of masks to heal up. So in a way, he is right, and that is a bit of a point that I brought up earlier. And maybe we could make the argument that we should have had an additional mask to start out with, so we got an extra true hit later on. But I think the overpowered tool that I got, the mask that protects your final mask, is also entirely missable, and that would probably change a lot of experiences if people had that one on. Because I never took that one off. That's just the GOAT as far as the tools are concerned. Lunar, you didn't have Garmond in the arena. I imagine it would have been harder, but I probably would have played a little bit more safely because I didn't know if Garmond could die during it. Mendacious, you say if a room entrance is a certain size and shape, you can just feel that there's a gate that's going to close behind you? Yeah. There was one that definitely took me by surprise. I think it was in Hunter's March where you fight the very big ant for the first time in the place that has the low ceiling. That one, I think that's the one that really took me by surprise.
Enemies, since 2 damage is so prevalent, and the only mask upgrades that really end up mattering because that's true are mask upgrades that put you at an odd number of health. So the issue is the balance here is severely off. 2 damage needs to be the exception rather than the rule, especially in the early game, like it was in OG Hollow Knight.
Well, it seems like Team Cherry agrees that this is an issue because they're now actively nerfing certain bosses and environmental hazards, which I just have to say, I have totally lost respect for Team Cherry. They have abandoned their artistic vision by catering to the people who refuse to get good. I will never buy another Team Cherry product again. And the second
I'm assuming that's satire, but it sounds like, yeah, whatever.
part of that criticism I mentioned, which was the new healing system. The new healing system also feels downright awful. It really feels like it exists.
Yeah, I'm still not entirely sure about how they feel about the damage. I'm assuming that this is just sarcasm and that they feel vindicated that they did tone back the damage. But I guess you could call me the gamer dude in the background here because I chose not to update my game so I could play with the increased hazard damage to fit that original artistic vision. The nerfs that exposed the Team Cherry is insecure that the integrity of their artistic vision is gone. Be prepared for a watered-down experience. All right, whatever. Yeah, it seems like satire, the way that it was presented here, but I think they didn't truly double back to the point that they're making about healing. And so it just does seem a little bit out of left field. Because we don't technically know how they feel about the hazards, other than what they said earlier with you take too much damage early game, which might be, you could make that argument, I suppose. I would disagree, but to each their own. Galamoth, you say it's a bad Silk post? Oh, I think this review is not satire, but I think the way that they're using it is done satirically.
I will never buy another Team Cherry product again. And the second part of that criticism I mentioned, which was the new healing system, the new healing system also feels downright awful. It really feels like it exists just to punish you. Having to spend your entire Silk bar and forcing you to heal for 3 masks encourages you to play recklessly because you don't want to waste it to only heal 1 or 2 masks. This will often result in unnecessary deaths because you want to be efficient with your Silk and only heal when you need to heal for 3. And this,
I think that's both a good and a bad thing. I think the devs are very deliberate about that, and we've discussed that a lot already. You could make the argument that the issue is Silk rather than healing, and I think the issue for me is actually more the Silk system than the heal system, to be honest.
in combination with the increased damage that you take from bosses and enemies now will cause you to lean into saving Silk for healing rather than being aggressive and using it for offensive abilities.
You also have to fully commit to any heal you want to do. You cannot cancel out of it like you could in the first. And if you're in that heal animation and you get hit during it, not only do you take 2 points of damage, you now lose the full Silk bar instead of just a third of it. The degree
I think this point is pretty fair, that you can't animation cancel out of your heal. There were definitely a couple times, especially in the last fight, that stand out to mind where I was going for a heal at a not completely safe point, but it was early enough on where I wasn't able to determine what the boss's next telegraph was going to be, and then I was kind of already locked into my healing animation, and that if I had the agency to animation cancel, even if it meant that I lost my Silk from doing so, I probably still would have done that and probably felt a little bit better overall than what had happened, knowing that what was coming next was inevitable, and that I should have chosen a completely safe point to heal. But the issue was I didn't know that, like, I failed to read that at the time that I was going to heal was not actually safe. Lunar says you can't cancel in the first. Is that true? Okay, maybe it's just because the animation was so much faster that it didn't matter. Yeah, but I would agree with you, Broccoli, that it did seem like a bit of a non sequitur, that it forces people to play recklessly because they don't want to heal for one. That's probably true for these dudes individually, but they should have said, like, it felt like we were forced, or it forced us to play recklessly because we didn't feel like the juice was worth the squeeze for the heals. Galamoth says, healing in the air invalidates so much of this game. It is typically the safest option, but you can still be gotten in there, especially with, like, the lace fight and whatnot. Lunar said, if you cancel mid-heal, you can't recover the soul used when you held the heal button. But you could cancel. So that's an animation cancel, not necessarily like a cost cancel. And I think they're talking about animation canceling. So being able to, like, dash away from this would be an animation cancel rather than, like, a true refund. Hey, Paisan, how's it going? Are we enjoying some complaining? Honestly, yes. A lot of the criticisms are pretty much what I imagined, and this is kind of solidifying, at least in my mind, that it seems like the complaints do seem overblown, although there are some validated points that have been brought up, I think. Mendacious, you think faster healing and healing for less is less punishing when you get hit? Hold on, let me try to reparse this. So you're saying you prefer the original Hollow Knight healing system? I can appreciate that. Broccoli said healing in the air takes longer. It's way less safe. Wait, does it? I thought the time was the same. If you're including the time to jump, then I think that's a bit of a different story. But I think you might be right there. But the reason why I would say healing in the air tends to be safer is because there's a lot of gaps in many enemies' aerial attacks, which makes it safer to position yourself to heal. Mendacious is saying the original Hollow Knight's healing is less punishing on mistakes. I would agree with that. Galamoth, you have more trouble healing during the bosses in Hollow Knight than in Silksong? Oh, really? Paisan, you watched an interesting video comparing the difficulty between both Hollow Knights earlier. They compared them with the metrics used in actual game development too. Interesting. Are you on the Discord? Would you mind throwing the link to that on the Discord? Or if you're not in the Discord, could you comment on this video itself, like my channel video itself, so that way it doesn't get lost in chat and I could look at it later? Broccoli, you might be wrong, but you're pretty sure it feels like it takes a whole extra second, not counting the time to jump? I don't think so. That might be worth, like, testing, I guess. Oops.
The degree to which this game punishes you had just been taken through the roof.
It really feels like when you get your heal interrupted with a hit, that boss run's essentially over.
Well, there felt like this really nice risk-reward system.
I completely disagree with that. There were many times where I got hit by the bosses and was taken down to one mask, but then I eked my way back up to being able to heal, and then was able to pull things through, especially with the many parries that I was able to do with the Wanderer. And there's probably times I should have been skill issued, but I just Bloodborne stayed aggressive and hunted.
In the OG Hollow Knight between using your soul or healing. And my real question to all of this, and again, genuinely, I want to know the answer to this. What was the reason for the change? Why did we change this? Did it need changing? It feels like this accomplishes nothing but being overly punishing and causing immense amounts of frustration. That's what...
Oh man, you could definitely tell that they're frustrated. Like, this didn't really bother me. Like, it is punishing, and it makes you have to slow down and think about combat a bit more methodically, because you have so many movement options compared to the first Hollow Knight. Maybe that's what it is, because Hornet is so much more mobile than the Knight. She'd probably be able to heal for free, and then that becomes a little bit less of a battle of attrition against many bosses if you can just outrun them. It's really rare of the bosses to truly catch Hornet if she's trying to avoid them. Like, one of the ones that stands out in being able to catch me was Lace. No, I guess some bosses are fast, but they don't chase you is what I mean. Like, you can just, if you position yourself, you can heal pretty well. Hey, Chadwick, congrats on clearing your stage. Broccoli, the Hollow Knight heal always felt too good to you, but maybe you're used to old Metroidvanias. I felt like the Hollow Knight heal was really good, unless you were against a specific boss like Grim, where the healing windows are pretty short, but there were windows once you kind of learned the pattern of boss attacks. D, you say Lace has a lot of anti-airs. It's really unsafe if you're jumping around, you noticed. True, you can parry bait her or animation bait her if you know what she's doing. Like, I got better at reading when she's going to do like the long arm attack, and that one I realized animation locks her a decent amount of time. So if I used my positioning to bait her into that attack, I would move out of her immediate vicinity into a slightly safer one and then heal from there.
This feels malicious.
And yeah, double jumping off the walls, like Galamoth says, was also really good for healing. I was kind of surprised that some of the walls and some of the fights were able to be jumped off of, to be honest.
It's there to punishing and causing immense amounts of frustration. That's what this feels like. This feels malicious.
It's there to get you extra deaths, so you can brag to your Wendy's coworker about beating that boss.
And so you can soy face on stream whenever you do beat a hard boss.
Like, what are these insults? They're just so dumb. I don't like to use that term like so flippantly, but like, these are just like straw men against people that aren't even here.
And you'll see with some things we talk about further in, it genuinely does feel like they balanced this around streamers making funny moments.
But speaking of malicious design,
I didn't feel that way at all. And I don't really take offense to the whole streamer thing at all. It's just a weird comment. Like, I'm sure devs thought about designing their game with streamers in mind. I mean, sure, there are elements where devs will be excited for specific moments for streamers, but I feel like that is just such a weird comment, to be honest.
and Chimpo, talk to us about the enemy and boss design.
The enemies and bosses in this game feel overly punishing rather than truly difficult, and to me it feels like it's an attempt to artificially lengthen the game by punishing you so hard for a small mistake. And there's a number of reasons for this. You have these large enemies with big hitboxes paired with 2 masks of contact damage. Bosses like Morwing and Savage Beastfly that zoom across the arena with an extremely large hitbox, and if you get hit, you...
It's such a weird complaint to me, because I'm like, oh man, this boss has a huge hitbox. I could just pogo off of him all day. And then that's actually what I did against the Savage Beastfly. I didn't really do that against the Mosswing too much, because I found you could just cheese them by bringing him to the left side of the room. Like, these kind of comments just show that they didn't try to engage with bosses in ways that would set them up for success. But I'm assuming they beat them. Like, what was... I don't understand the criticisms here too much. Yeah, I don't know.
lose 2 masks.
What's even better is that
It's really just the 2-mask argument all over again, but I feel like if they legitimately had 3 masks to begin with and only lost 1 health, they probably wouldn't complain when the current system is actually giving them more opportunities to succeed. I still don't understand the argument that they were making earlier about the 3-mask system. Like, that is objectively worse. They're just literally being hung up on 2 masks. It's so silly to me.
you can take contact damage from these bosses even when they're stunned. So if they have a big hitbox, say like something like Sister Splinter, say you stun her, she then falls from the roof and onto the ground. If you were under her when that happens, or if you accidentally get too close and fail.
I think being upset that she hurts you if she falls down is silly, but being upset that she hurts you if you walk into her when she's already down, that is a little bit different, and I can understand that. But that's just kind of common in video games. Like, sure, I get disappointed. I get being disappointed, but this is one of my toxic gaming moments, but it's just like, get good.
The space properly, even when she's stunned, she is dealing 2 massive of damage and completely screwing you.
The amount of times I ran up on an enemy just flopping around on the ground and was spamming hits against them and just took a hit out of nowhere is insane. You should not.
That happened to me too, but then that's also a bit of feedback to say, hey, you need to understand the spacing of your weapons a bit better, or stop doing something that gets you punished so heavily. And the game is pretty forgiving about giving you a little bit of space to do hit and run tactics, and not having to go all in Bloodborne style like I was doing. I was successful despite this method, so I think that just shows that to me, like, the devs tune the game for players to be successful through multiple ways of expressing their skills. Lunar, you said the only malicious part is the bile water bench, but even then it ties to the lore. Yeah, that's kind of how I felt as well. Like, the only truly blindsiding part of the game were the 2 bile water benches, but by the second one, I was like, okay, that's on me. you fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. The second one, that was me. But I digress. Galma says, don't walk into the motionless object. Broccoli, you say, as someone who works on games for a living, by far the most discouraging thing about it is that gamer dudes are so opinionated without even thinking about why things are done one way in good faith. I mean, that's just how it is. You can't really please everybody. Being in content creation is kind of like a similar vibe. Like, you're not going to mesh with everybody, but hopefully you'll find an audience that can appreciate what you're doing for themselves. And that's pretty much the most I think anybody can hope for. So don't get too discouraged. It can suck getting the negative comments, but I think it's also important sometimes to look at videos like this to understand that other people's negative criticisms don't necessarily really have to stick to you very much as well. They just hate their fans, grr. Luna said Beastfly was not that much of an issue. The extra mobs that spawn cause you more problems, limiting your positioning. Okay. Did I one-shot or two-shot the Beastfly? I did come to the Beastfly fight a little bit later, and I think I had the Silksong ability, so I didn't have issues with the ads. So people's individual experiences will certainly vary there. But for me, like, Silksong felt like really, really good in terms of its balance and difficulty. I was a little bit disappointed that some bosses were easier than I expected them to be honest. And I'm fine with that because there were other parts of the game that were more challenging and made it more fun and rewarding for me because they were challenging. And I feel like if the challenge was toned down a bit more, I actually would have enjoyed the game less than I did, to be honest. It's toxic. It's like visiting a museum of modern art and just saying the art doesn't look good at a glance. I mean, there is some validity to that. Art doesn't have to appeal to everybody equally. And so I think people are perfectly valid for saying that certain things don't look good at a glance, but that just goes to show they could be interfacing with it in a way that's not intended by the artist. And you can't really do anything about that other than trying to point out the way that things should be interfaced with. And the difficulty with games or even art is that you can't force somebody else to have someone else's experience. D, you said the Biowater boss run backbench made you glad you went somewhere else. If there's one thing you'd change, you'd probably put that charm that blocks the maggot stuff hidden in a room in Biowater. That's probably a fair point. Chadwick, what you hear from this video is that Hornet is not the knight. Yeah, that's actually a pretty good encapsulation of many of the videos so far. Fair enough.
Be able to take contact damage while they are stunned. On top of that, another incredibly frustrating thing is the windows to punish bosses are so small. You have these bosses like the Last Judge or the second Lace fight that are particularly egregious in this aspect. As the Last Judge has this really fast startup kind of get off me move where she spins her flail. You don't have time to get more than one hit in before that move comes out.
Is that a problem? I mean, sure, some of the like boss stuns might feel a little bit short, but I think they're still pretty well balanced, especially if you're using tools at opportunistic points. Like, he hasn't used... I really don't like criticizing like how people are playing because it's dumb. People play the way that they want to enjoy the games. Although this is funny. He's got the needle that poisons himself on. That's irrelevant. But anyway, there are ways to punish things, but there's only like a couple bosses that I felt like was actually difficult to punish them. One was the flower boss after Seth, and Lace is a little bit punishing, but that Lace is also... she's that way for a reason, you know? I don't want to say too much more than that. Yeah, I feel like the Last Judge might not have big windows of punishing... hold on, let me try to think of how to phrase this. Like, there isn't one specific move that you're going to get a lot of hits in at once, but I feel like the consistency of being able to punish the Last Judge was really high. But I did face the Last Judge a little bit later than many other people did, and with a little bit more damage, but it seemed like a pretty fair fight. It seemed like one of the more well-balanced ones to me, in terms of like its moveset. Mendacious, you got caught by the windup so often, it felt almost instant to you. Galamoth asks, why should every attack have a generous punish window? That's a good point. D says people want them Zelda game punish windows where they stand there for 15 seconds with a glowing weak spot. I think there are times where there should be that, and then times where the punishment windows should be a little bit shorter. And this kind of ties back into what I was talking about in my Shadow the Erdtree boss critique video, essentially, or the DLC video, that the one where I say like it broke me. Certain boss attacks like Bale's big explosions felt like you couldn't punish them, and that felt a little bit egregious to me because all of the Bale fight was just kind of like hit and run, and it just kind of got really tedious when he could almost one-shot you, especially if you weren't using charms, or not charms, what are they called? Scadu tree fragments, as opposed to other bosses. But I didn't really have any issues with Placidusax, because at least when Placidusax did his nuke, he kind of became inactive for a bit. And I don't necessarily need Placidusax to have a huge punishable window, but it feels sufficiently rewarding when a boss does a really big attack and misses it, and then that gives me an opportunity to do a really big attack or a really big punishment in return. And Bale didn't have that to that same degree, and I think that's kind of the same issue that's going on with like the Last Judge. He might not have like such huge attacks that leaves him vulnerable for a long time. He just kind of has pretty quick yet decently spaced apart attacks that can be punished quickly and consistently, which I think works perfectly well. Whereas Bale had huge hitting attacks that you couldn't punish, so it felt a little bit one-sided, if that makes sense. Oh no, I would definitely agree with you, Broccoli, that there are such things as willful ignorance and the lack of curiosity that can definitely diminish the way that one interfaces with something to the point that I would describe it as being bad faith. But I think you and I kind of fundamentally agree on the same things. I'm just talking a little bit in a different direction there.
And with Lace,
Paisani said people need to use the sprint attack more. It's especially good against the Lost Judge because you can space his attacks and sprint in for a three hit and avoid the next attack. Maybe, but that all depends. I don't disagree with you to an extent. If you're not sprinting, I imagine that fight would be a lot more difficult. But point one, it depends on what crest you're using and what sprint attack is affiliated with that crest. The Wanderer's sprint attack is extremely good. The Hunter's sprint attack is also extremely good for the 1-2 windows. The Reaper is not as much. And then point two would be, as they brought up earlier in this video, they hated getting contact damage for 2 masks and running into bosses. And so maybe that's, what's the word? Conditioned them away from using sprint attacks more often because they were bad at it and getting punished too much for it. And then at that point, I don't know if it's really like a player issue or something within the fundamental game design that forced them to feel a certain way, which affected the way that they played later on. That can be a legitimate argument to talk about for sure. So I think there is some nuance to it. But yeah, I definitely agree that the sprint attack is a huge boon if you're able to get it down effectively. Luna, you relied on it too much that you got parried by Lace. You had to calm down. Same here. Same here.
she has an incredibly fast parry that punishes you if you swing more than one time in almost all cases. So there's just not much room for you to get any significant punishes in.
See, to me, like, I don't think he's wrong here, but I think that also just speaks to the quality of the game design. When you have a character who's fast and agile like Lace, where the same strategy that you're using against the really big dudes like the last judge is not going to be nearly as effective.
And when it seems like the bosses go for big commit moves on their end.
Oh yeah. Well, it seems like this game is very much of the philosophy.
Like that move right there, like they did I think a really good job with the actual balance of Lace's fight, because you can open up a lot of punish windows, not necessarily large punish windows. So they might have wanted more larger punish windows in general, but I don't think that would actually be better for the game. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're invalid for not feeling like they would have. They are not invalid for not enjoying the game as much as they otherwise would have had there been larger punish windows, if that makes sense. And yes, Broccoli, you can parry her counters, and that just speaks to, like, the game does give you a lot of options, but it doesn't necessarily mean that one loadout is the perfect size for every fight encounter. So to me, that just shows like a lot of strength in the actual design of the game, that, hey guys, certain encounters are going to be more challenging depending on what build you're running. Mendacious, because you're playing with the Reaper Crest, you're used to punish windows being just one attack. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to have a lot of attacks go off, then maybe the Reaper Crest isn't the one to do it. Yeah, Paisan, looking back, I think you're right there that the claw line is also especially good for getting the most out of your openings from safe spacing. It's something that I probably should have integrated a bit more, but I was also relying on... Oh, that's what it was, huh? I would rely more on the sprint attack, at least with the Wanderer, because I knew I could go bop, bop, whereas if I did the needle in, I would get the initial contact damage, which seems less than an actual needle hit, but maybe I'm wrong there. It just felt that way. So yeah, that just kind of like if you're using the Hunter Crest, maybe the Reaper Crest, the claw line is the one you want to use. Play, brother. YouTube being YouTube again.
Commit moves on their end.
Oh yeah. Well, it seems like this game is very much of the philosophy you get 1, maybe 2 hits if you're using like a Wanderer's Crest or something, then you're done. But pair that also with the tiny arenas. I know we talked about him earlier, but Savage Beastfly is a special brand of cancer. He is one of the hardest early game bosses only because of his tiny arena, his map.
This is just absolute garbage. I'm sorry. Like, look at how much space there is. Maybe when you add in the ads, but then there are ways to mitigate that between your tools, your actual silk skill, and maybe you don't want to use your silk skill because you want to heal. But I mean, if you're getting hit by the dudes, then that's kind of incentive to save your masks by killing them before they hit you. But anyway.
Massive hitboxes and the multiple.
Like, this is the full screen. It's not like a half screen. This is crazier. D says, how much bigger can it be? Yeah, this is wild.
Ads that he summons. This boss isn't even
like this. To me, the Savage Beastfly didn't really feel that different from the Bone Tyrant, other than I guess the ads. But I will admit, I did come into the fight later. Although I also didn't have a problem with the double Savage Beastfly fight. Tiny arena, it's larger than your apartment.
really that hard as much as it is chaotic in RNG. And that's what makes the fight so insufferable. Like, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to predict or direct the flow of this boss fight.
You just did it! Your footage shows you doing it! What is
Really
this
that
comment?
hard as much as it is chaotic in RNG. And that's what makes the fight
Such RNG.
so insufferable. Like, it
So insufferable.
is very difficult, if not impossible.
Very difficult, you gotta stun. Like, at least if you're gonna make these comments, make your footage look like it flows better. Like, this is funny. Is this all just a rage bait video?
Possible to
Are we getting played, guys?
predict or direct the flow of this boss fight.
Chaos is the perfect word to describe this because he can actually kill his own ads with this ground pound move he does. So you would think, okay, I'll lead him over to them to kill them to kind of clear space for me to operate. But some of the ads literally have moves where they are invulnerable during this and he will go right through them. And it's RNG which ads he spawns, and some are most certainly harder than others and take up.
All right, so I might not have experienced that mechanic well enough to know exactly how that works. I could definitely I could definitely understand them being disappointed at the iframes that the enemies have, but that also works against the players when you're fighting them. So maybe they just didn't have enough experience with that type of enemy before this point. Like, I can see there is a level of sense to it that a boss attack should probably overwrite what they assumed should have just been super armor, and a boss's hyper armor should crush that, but it doesn't. But it's also just kind of consistent with how else the game functions that this comment seems a little bit strange to me, and it feels even more, what's the word? I don't want to say ludicrous, but like flippant as the other comments that came before it, because it just seems a little bit too sensationalized for me.
More space in the arena.
And since you don't have an iframe dash, it's very possible for you to get positioned into a corner and screwed. And not even because of a misplay on your end, just because of all the
All right, at least him getting caught by that ant right there, that I think is a little bit fair to be salty about. Like, that's just a little bit bad RNG, though. Like, that just happens.
get positioned into a corner and screwed. And not even because
I guess he does have a decent windup before that, but it is pretty quick.
of the misplay
And that's just bad luck.
on your end, just because of all the chaos. He can summon up to 3 ads. It's insane. I don't know who thought this was great, but apparently they loved it so much they thought, you know what, we'll reuse this boss later. But on top of all that, in regards to enemy and boss designs, a little extra bit of cancer is that you have tiny invincibility when
God, I hate it when people call things cancer, because if you have people in your family who've ever had cancer, it just feels really diminishing the gravity of what cancer actually is. I absolutely hate that language.
windows when it comes to taking damage, and sometimes you don't have any at all. For example, whenever you fight the Forge brothers, say they hit you too close to the wall. They will do 2 damage on the hit, and if you're too close to the wall, they'll push you into it for another 2 mask of damage because you hit the lava there with no time to recover. It's absurd. I think I'll play another game.
That's the true getting good of this game, is just to turn it off and play something else.
Stuff.
That is kind of just a skill issue, though. Like, I'm really curious how many attempts they spent on these bosses. Like, I don't think they need to have a high amount or not, but to me, I'm just like, okay, you've learned that if you get hit in this position, you can potentially be put into the wall. Did you learn from that point that you shouldn't be in this position and you should, like, focus on where you are more? Like, why is this such a bad thing? Like, yes, this is heavily punishing, but that seems to be a little bit more of the exception than the rule here. So it seems adequate to me that it should be a little bit more heavily punishing because of the circumstances surrounding it. How do you guys feel about that in the chat? D said that was another boss you parried to death and didn't think about. Same here. I thought that fight was kind of easy and I wanted it to be harder. Maybe not harder, but I just felt like the boss's moves were very one-dimensional. I just wanted them to have at least like another attack each or something to help add variety. Paisan, you can understand being salty about the lava, but yeah, you can learn and not do that again. Lunar said the Grub Mother arena is even smaller than that, and the boss bounces around randomly. Which one was the Grub Mother? The Slab Boss? Slab Boss, right? I don't remember her super well. Global, you're repeating yourself, but you don't believe they believe what they're saying? That's kind of what I'm wondering now. And we're only like 9 minutes in. Gruzbither. Oh. In the original Hollow Knight, the first boss. Was she the first boss? I only remember the big fake guy being the first boss.
Uninstall.
Yeah, maybe we're all just getting baited.
Download the mod where enemies only deal 1 mask instead of 2.
I wonder why that one's so popular. And on top of the things we've been mentioning, flying enemies that spam projectiles while running away from you are incredibly prevalent in this game.
Yes, they spam these things like crazy.
Well, I remember specifically in the arena fight in Greymoor, you have these birds that stay at a high range away from you, constantly run away, spam multiple projectiles at once, like the kunai bird, and then are very inconsistent in when they actually come low enough for you to actually get a hit in. It's obnoxious.
And they're not the only one.
Those ones honestly weren't that bad to me. The enemies that do legitimately annoy me are the ghillie-suited dudes in Blighttown, as well as... Man, there's something really... Oh yeah, the ones in Putrefied Ducts that are really fast and they spam that projectile. Granted, I really could have played a lot better against those dudes, and maybe I should have used the claw attack to get close and bridge that gap. But positioning against them, at least with my toolkit, was a little bit challenging, but that doesn't really bother me too much because it makes certain areas stand out and makes me have to interface with the game differently than I have elsewhere. So I think it's just kind of getting mad that that you can't just continue to do the same thing ad nauseum, which is... I can understand that to a degree, and I understand why in other videos people are like the Elden Ring response videos to like my video saying that I didn't like the boss design for this or that reason, and then people are saying, well, you're just doing the same thing that you did in all the other games. I'm like, to an extent, yes, but also no, because I've done different things. I've played all the other games. They've been different, and I've adapted and enjoyed them. But the way that I've had to adapt to Elden Ring doesn't really feel like an adaptation as much as a breaking of expectations. And it just doesn't match my preferred playstyle, which is fine. But for anybody else who does have my kind of preferred playstyle, I just kind of made my video to express that opinion to. And maybe they're doing that here. And that's probably fine that Hollow Knight Silksong does not meet their expectations. But the weirder thing to me is I don't really see what's going on in this critique as being of a fundamentally different sort of design that was present within the original Hollow Knight. Like, the original Hollow Knight was not that linear of a game in terms of its, like, combat mechanics, that players didn't have to learn enemy patterns and adjust to them. Like, why could we really compare the difficulty of Savage Beastfly to Grim or Pantheon 5 at all? Like, it just seems a little bit of a strange comparison to me. Hey Dylan and hey Hilka, welcome back in, you guys. You've been watching some unskilled friends play this game. You think the boss ads just punish unskilled players and shell shards make them scared to use tools at all because they ran out quickly? Yeah, I will definitely agree that I don't think the shell shard system is as good as it could be, and I think it has the same flaws as the Spirit Emblem system interacting with the tools in Sekiro. Paisan said you could either do the Falk Knight or the Gru's Mother first. Okay. Gru's Marm. Broccoli says, brother, you can slash the projectiles. Maybe that's actually a good point. Maybe some people don't know you can do that, because I was parrying a lot of projectiles when I could. And I was also trying to use some of the enemies' attacks where I knew they'd throw projectiles to hit them as well. Mendacia said Grim is actually fun to fight. Got me. Welcome back in, Chadwick.
Once. The Bilehaven bush enemies do this, where they'll go down into the map and then jump up at random intervals to spray not one projectile at you, but two, and then jump.
I wouldn't mind these dudes as much if they stayed dead when you killed them, but the fact that they respawn infinitely was a little bit annoying.
Back in the map, repeat until they're dead. Or the little flying bell throwers that are seen throughout the game. They're tons of fun running away from you constantly while throwing crap at you.
But why is this a problem, though? Like, yes, they're annoying. Yes, they make combat a bit more dynamic and something else they have to keep track of. But to Hollow Knight Silksong's credit here, as Broccoli was saying, you can parry these things, and sometimes you can even parry the enemy projectiles back into them, or their friends. And to me, that's like an even more exciting expression of skill, being able to keep track of multiple enemies and then trying to prioritize which one you want to kill first. To me, adds a level of strategy that I really enjoy in the games. And that's kind of one thing that I didn't like about Elden Ring as much as other games like Bloodborne, because I still think that one of the Elden Ring's biggest weaknesses and things that they should have had in it is that they should have kept the limb break system in from Bloodborne, especially for the big boys. So that way you could have more points to focus on and gain more, not necessarily punish windows, but exploitation windows to kind of maximize your damage with different styles of play. So if you're like a big bonk build, maybe breaking enemy limbs gives you more opportunities to deal damage, whereas if you're running a bleed build, you don't need to rely on that as much because you're getting those bleed or frost procs and stuff. Paisan, your take is that no one would hate the Beastfly if it had a cooler artistic design? That's funny. Maybe. That is a thing, though. Like, wasn't there that one Battlefield game where people, or maybe it was COD, one of them, where people didn't like using one weapon and they thought it absolutely sucked, and so the devs just changed the sound design, and people were like, oh my god, this gun is so good now. And it was literally numerically the same as it was before, just the audio design had changed. Paisan, that's your gripe with the Beastfly? It's not that it's cool, or it's that it's not cool and doesn't look cool or anything like that. Okay. Fair
And on
enough.
top of all the projectile spam, a lot of bosses overload the arena with visual clutter.
Go get him, Shimpo.
One guy comes to mind here. His official name is...
Okay, Trobio is a bit of a fair comparison. There were a couple times where, like, I totally got by something that I could not see because of the flashbang effect.
I have lovingly dubbed him Trunio, because this man covers his tiny boss arena in fireworks and gas and zooms around in tornado form like the Tasmanian devil, and screams his name constantly throughout the fight just to make it even better. Not to mention, he is constantly going underground where he's safe to spam projectiles at you, and he will backdash away from you when he sees you dash in to get a hit after he finally stops his tornado attack. Just absolute boy kisser behavior.
Yeah, if you don't hit it.
What the hell, man? Alright. That'll be it for this video, guys. I'm gonna go ahead and dislike it. Like, it's one thing to complain about a game, but to just throw these kind of weird-ass side comments, straw men that have nothing to do with the game is just kind of embarrassing, to be honest. Like, I feel embarrassed for them. Makes me, like, mentally facepalm. It's like, you're making your own video worse by having these kind of comments. And, yeah, I don't really want to support it. So, full-on rage bait, perhaps. Global, you're waiting for something like that to come out. It's kind of what I figured. I was trying, to give it the best shake because some people are not the most eloquent at expressing their frustrations, and I still don't actually know if this is full-on rage bait, but I'm assuming it must be. But this really sucks because I'm willing to hear their complaints about Chobio because I was resonating with it, but it's just so asinine. So anyway, it definitely sucks ending the stream on this note, but it is kind of getting late. I was going to definitely go a little bit over time watching the rest of it, so I'm not really regretting checking or like ending it early here. I'm just disappointed more than anything, which sounds like such a dad line, but it's true. Not angry, just disappointed. So, even if the video is rage bait, at least the comments might not be. There's no reason not to have a bench before a boss. I can understand not like being disappointed at that, because some boss run backs are annoying. I don't necessarily think it's always required. I think there's enough benches before bosses where the variety is welcome, because otherwise it might become a little bit formulaic, which could be a good or a bad thing depending on your preferences. So this, might not read this entire thing, but Octopod2976 said, Silksong made me think I was constantly learning something when in reality I just breached a wall by smashing my head on it. Hell yeah, brother. I really struggled with the default pogo, then became really good at it. Then I found another crest, and what I've learned became useless. Well, you could have stuck with it, but that was your choice there, at least. You learn to glide very early on too, then you get a floaty, slow momentum killing double jump which overwrites gliding. Seems absurd to me in such a punishing game with tight and clunky platforming. The grappling hook is weird too. It's a way to grab things, pogo on enemies or bumpers, but you can use it as a second aerial dash for some reason. I read a lot of people saying Hornet is like a ballerina, so much faster than the Hollow Knight. This is absolutely not what I felt. Ledge grab feels forced and tedious. Oh really? Not being able to long jump / dash attack instantly is very frustrating too. Oh, dash attack instantly. I could agree with that. Not being able to long jump instantly. Yeah, that's fair. Because when you're on a small platform, I felt like that as well. And the way that I mitigated that was by jumping off the platform and then dashing onto it so I could make the long jump. So I definitely appreciate this point right here. Hollow Knight felt very snappy. Hornet has the stupid turnaround latency when running and walking. It's not latency like this, an animation thing, but if you don't like the feel of that, it's totally understandable. Plushie is way too big or the camera is way too close that you can't see stuff. Tools are a pain to use. I can agree with this. It's the same control schemes on Hollow Knight, but in an overtuned everything game, it just doesn't work. It's overcomplicated for no reason. Most videos I've seen showcase a poisonous cogfly build anyway. I know there's a lot of niche things, but niche things is not what you use to overcome an increasingly punishing difficulty. This game looks like it was built for players to find one thing, then another and another, and have a coherent progression. In reality, a lot of stuff is trollingly hidden behind breakable walls or bullcrap double jump only holes in the ceiling. I'm talking complete secret areas, keys are very helpful tools. The devs spent 7 years getting good at their own game and designed everything according to their experience, and elite try-hard players of Hollow Knight who did Pantheon 5 with all binds. Everything feels tedious for no reason, traps upon traps. Lots of backtracking. Unlocking Act 3 is a pain in the butt. I hate this game and sometimes like it very much, but the bad is very bad, and it seems Team Cherry told us to get good and F ourselves. Which I did. They got a Steel Soul run past Widow? What is this? Okay, I could totally understand hating it, but then to go into Steel Soul, that's just really funny to me. It feels like this dude just shot themselves in the foot. That is so hilarious. Oh my goodness. I hate this game. I played Steel Soul and got to Widow. That is, peak. Chef's kiss right there. The best part is this comment isn't even rage bait, but I really like this one, to be honest. So the reason why I like this one is because this just shows a person who prefers a different type of game than what Silksong came out to be. And I actually think this kind of feedback is very valuable for players who play like this person. So yeah, I like that one. It's a lot better than the actual video itself. So let me check back in with you guys in the chat. Dylan, you think sometimes people have a legitimate kernel to their grievances, but aren't aware enough and start to rationally see everything as negative? Yeah, that's kind of what I was feeling. Like, after a while, it's like, wait, why are these complaints? And how come these complaints aren't actually secret strengths of the game? And I think sometimes all somebody needs is just that little bit of a shift in perspective to help them reconceive like what they're experiencing in the game and actually come to appreciate something that they initially disliked. There's definitely been some songs that I didn't really like when I first listened to them, but I had a friend point out what they liked about the song, and that made me come to appreciate the song more than I would have on my own. And then through that experience, I was able to actually unironically like the song later and stuff. Lunar, you said Hollow Knight felt snappy. You went back to Hollow Knight after Silksong and it felt so slow. I mean, the overall movement is definitely slower. I do think Hollow Knight is a very responsive game and is snappy, and the inputs respond super well to the player. But I definitely think Silksong does feel a lot better. Dylan, you think one can argue a game can be slow and snappy? Hollow Knight is slow, but there's not really input delay or forced commitments. You just can't move fast. Yeah, exactly. Hey, Northern Tommy, welcome into the stream. You heard these games are good? It depends. So the first video we watched tonight put it probably the best way that I think anybody else can do it, in that the games are evolutionary, not necessarily revolutionary, and the hype surrounding them makes it sound like the games are true revolutions in gaming. And so some people might fall a little bit flat because of preconceived expectations that these games are revolutionizing gaming, but they aren't necessarily doing that. But what I will say is that both Hollow Knight 1 and Silksong are extremely polished And if you enjoy platformers to any degree, I think they're very easy recommendations. And if you enjoy Metroidvanias, then they are extremely easy recommendations. Yeah, no problem. Thanks for dropping in the stream. Galamoth, you're playing Hollow Knight right now. It's slower, but still fun. Broccoli said, your partner told you, you know when you beat a very hard boss and you're rewarded with nothing but the ability to progress? Which, coming from a FromSoft perspective, makes sense, would be expected. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think. There were a couple bosses where I felt like I didn't really get anything for beating them. One of them was the Last Judge, but that's also because I went into the Last Judge backwards, which is very, very obvious from the way that the game was not designed to handle the way that I encountered the Last Judge, by kind of soft-locking me a little bit, not literally, and me having to go explore more to backtrack appropriately to fight him. Northern Tommy, you don't know where to start with these other than the generic. It's like platformer Dark Souls, which is not really helpful, so thank you. If you've ever played a game like Super Metroid or Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Hollow Knight is definitely much, much closer in comparison to those games than Dark Souls. The reason why people say that Hollow Knight is like Dark Souls is because of the way that much of its lore is shared to the player. It's a little bit sporadic, and the story isn't as in your face as other games, which is pretty par for the course for Metroid games as well. But players nowadays are more familiar with Dark Souls than Metroid. Yeah, you expect souls are ruined from defeating the boss. True. Paisan, you honestly like that not everything exists to reward the players. It makes the world feel more natural. And, well, on one hand, it can be a little bit disappointing to not get anything from a boss. I also think that helps taper expectations that maybe you shouldn't expect a boss to have something to give you. Like, at a certain point, that just kind of shows off the player's entitlement. And getting a little bit of a reality check isn't always the worst thing in the world. Tommy, you've seen a few retrospectives on Rondo of Blood and the main Castlevania that's considered the best. They look great. Nice, yeah. Tommy, what types of games do you like to play? Because I'm not sure what else I can compare Hollow Knight to that would be in your wheelhouse. A Roid Souls? Roidvania. Let me go ahead and hydrate here. Tommy, you found that some modern games take that format of an old game and basically add quality of life and playability improvements. Yeah, so that's kind of exactly how Hollow Knight and Silksong work. They just kind of iterate on very old established concepts and they polish them to a really good degree that playing both games, like moment to moment, feels really good and snappy and responsive. Silksong, it's kind of like, it feels better than Super Mario Brothers 3 moment to moment to me. Although it is difficult, but so can Super Mario Brothers 3 can also be really difficult, to be honest, up until you know a stage. Which is why some of these critiques feel really strange to me. Like, this is nothing new in gaming, but I don't really see people complaining about the difficulty of Mario. Which could you guys imagine if Mario 3 came out today as like the next big game ever, if people were like the next big indie game ever? People would probably be like, oh, this game is too hard. It's wild. If you're used to older Metroidvanias, locking a way forward is the reward. True. Imagine if Morrowind came out today. Hell yeah. That's almost like Baldur's Gate to an extent, Baldur's Gate 3, but it is a little bit more handholdy for sure. Yeah, I always felt like gaming changed with Oblivion being such a huge departure. Maybe I should say Fallout 3. Wait, which one came out first? Oblivion or Fallout 3? Anyway, for me, like the switch from Oblivion to Skyrim is what I call like the Ubisoftification of video gaming, when everything became super tutorialized and held players' hands and gave them way too many guides to what they needed to do, rather than trusting that players could figure it the hell out or suffer. Growing up playing games with my mom, we definitely were on the suffer struggle bus with playing games like Legacy of the Wizard and having no idea of how to progress things than the little sheets of paper that might be occasionally included with the game that you rented from other players who got stuck in parts. Oh man, that kind of reminds me, there was my mom was playing, I think maybe the original Breath of Wild for the Super Nintendo when it came out, and she was chain renting it, but the funny thing was somebody else was also chain renting the game. So like she would rent it for like 3 or 5 days or whatever it was that Blockbuster did. Then she'd like have to return it. And then somebody else, this other guy would rent it. And then like they were kind of like at a race with each other, like week to week, it seemed. It was pretty funny. Oblivion was before Fallout 3. Okay, thank you, Dylan. Imagine if Sonic 3 came out today, or Metroid Prime 2. Metroid Prime 2 would get pooped on for sure. I kind of pooped on it back in the day as well as now. Which, my issue with Metroid Prime 2 was just, it was really, like, they had too much backtracking in that game. Like, I did not mind the backtracking in Metroid Prime 1 at all, but 2 felt, it got to the point where it was a little bit tedious. Global said, now is a good time to mention that the new Majuler Ultimate video just dropped. Nice. How long is this one? 6 hours, or is it just another 3-hour banger? Broccoli, it's weird hearing this as Ubisoftification to you that started all the way back with Zelda 2. Zelda 2? I'm trying to remember, like, why would you say Zelda 2 is Ubisoftified? Zelda 3, Link to the Past. Okay. I was like, Zelda 2, I was really confused. Because that one is pretty rough. Link to the Past, I could kind of see it, but I would not compare Link to the Past to like Oblivion in terms of directing players where they needed to go. Link to the Past was more linear, but I don't think like the game was worse off for it, because you could still out of sequence things pretty easily in that one. So Tommy, as far as mentioning other channels on my channel, I'm going to be real here. Like, as a streamer, it's a little bit annoying if somebody's like brand new to the chat and they're like, oh, hey, what are good channels you can recommend? But if it's something like, oh, we're talking about this thing that's on topic and I'm contributing to the discussion, I totally welcome that. I don't have such a big ego to think that my channel is the only one that should exist on YouTube. And often like the recommendations are cool. I didn't know about Majuler until my chat told me about him. I only played like Ultima 3 and 7 with my mom back in the day. And because of that, I'm able to enjoy some cool new things as well, because they were relevant to the channel. Sorry, Tommy, I'm actually already over time, and this last video was a little bit unfortunate with the way that it ended. So I'm not going to be on it too much longer. But yeah, make sure you subscribe, gamers, so that way you can stick around for further discussions and whatnot. No, there's definitely that little bit of, newbie anxiety from entering a new channel. So don't feel worried about that at all. Totally understandable. Like, I don't like to name drop other channels when I'm new to a community as well. All right, thank you, Tommy. Yeah, I stream every day starting at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, speaking of which, tomorrow I'm not entirely sure what I want to do. It seemed like we got a pretty good representation of the Silksong stuff for tonight as far as discussions go. I am possibly considering playing Silksong again and maybe just getting to the point where we do the Grey Root ending. That seems like it could be fun. I'm also considering going back and finishing the hell difficulty of Diablo 2, which will probably only take a day or two. And then after that, I'm still thinking about either doing a Bow Path of the Teal Lotus, or maybe even potentially Disgaea 3, because I've had that on my backlog for a super long time, but I don't know. Paisan, what channel on the Discord should you post the video that you're talking about earlier? Hey guys, do you remember how I said I don't remember what you post on the chat, which is why I ask for reminders? What was the video about, Paisan? Because you can either post it in channel videos feedback. Yeah, that'll be a good one. Channel video feedback, or even general is fine. But for ones that I watch on stream, I like it in the channel feedback section, because that way they're all combined and I can easily add them to my playlist. Dylan, you enjoyed replaying Silksong a lot. It's very replayable. Oh yeah, for sure. Especially with the way that I sequenced the game the first time around. Seems like you could break it even further, which is lovely. Oh yeah. Thank you, Paisan. All right, folks, so that'll be it for tonight's stream. I will try to figure out what I want to stream tomorrow. Maybe I will do the Silksong because it's fun. There's still more to do. I don't want to like leave it off. Well, maybe I should leave it off my list of things to do, because if they ever get DLC, there's more incentive. But then I wouldn't be incentivized to do the other ending. So yeah, I think I will start up a new save file and maybe do the Grey Root ending, just for the memes of it. So, okay, yeah, I think that sounds good. And then I'll do Diablo after that. So, okay, folks, that'll be it for tonight's stream. We'll be starting Silksong again tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So hopefully I'll catch you all on the next one. Till then, take care, stay safe. Last Protagonist out.